Thank you for joining us tonight for this public information meeting on behalf of Saratoga Biochar Solutions, LLC. This forum is being held in accordance with the requirements from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. All legally required public notices have been made in advance of the forum within the time guidelines required by New York State DEC. A recording of the transcript of tonight's forum will be provided to the DEC along with a record of registered participants. This meeting is intended for the benefit of the residents and businesses, primarily business owners of Hudson Falls, Fort Edward, and Glens Falls that live or operate within a 2-mile radius of the proposed facility location in Moreau that are also within what DEC has determined under New York State CLCPA law to be disadvantaged communities or environmental justice zones. It's important that every adult in the room signs in for the purpose just stated above. If you have minors with you, please cross off a space below the name for each minor, or maybe Sue has already helped with that on the way in. We just need to keep track of head count. It looks like we're going to be well under 300, but this room, according to Bill Nikas, the building owner, has a 300-person fire code capacity. And on that note, I want to thank Bill Nikas and the Sandy Hill Art Center for allowing the use of the facility for this meeting tonight. Very helpful. The technology in the Zoom meeting forum is being administered by Technical Video Incorporation of Albany, and we appreciate their help. Rob, who's facing me and can see all of you on the side there at the end on my right, is part of the technical video team and is our Zoom administrator this evening. Rob will be randomly selecting folks that wish to speak when we get to the comments and question and answer period, and he's going to do that randomly and try to bounce back and be fair between people in the room versus remote participants versus potentially even direct dial-in attendees. So please don't pick on Rob. He's got a tough job tonight. My name is Ray Appy. I'm the CEO of Saratoga Biochar Solutions, and joining me here are Bryce Meeker, our president, and Lee Wolfecool, chief operating officer. And then on my left here, Andrew Millspaw is our consultant engineer with Sterling Environmental Engineering. We'll begin our presentation in a moment, and that'll be followed by a question and answer session, and the meeting will end at 9. Before we begin, I'd like to establish just a few ground rules for participation tonight. The first is signs. It looks good now, but just please recognize that there is a camera for recording this up on that post behind you up the center aisle, and if signs are held up in front of that, it won't be able to do its job, so appreciate the colorful signs, and if you want to hold them up, maybe just off to the side or just something that's not in the direct line of that camera, because that would disrupt. We will hear from as many folks as possible within the time limit of this meeting, which ends at 9. And Rob, who I just introduced, will randomly select speakers from live audience who are participating remotely. Folks who use dial-in audio only, Rob will choose a couple of times during the evening to try to select some of them and give them the floor. We're allowing more time for this meeting than we did in December in an effort to try to have everyone have an opportunity to speak. Folks who wish to ask a question or make a statement will have 3 minutes. Please be concise and recognize there are others in the room who want to have a chance to be heard as well. So if you could kind of stick to that time frame, that's going to make it more fair for all of your community members. And please remember, this forum is required by New York State DEC for the purpose of gathering information from Saratoga Biochar Solutions for you. If we determine that a speaker is being profane, belligerent, threatening, or otherwise operating outside the bounds of civilized public forum, we reserve the right to cut that speaker off for the sake of education, safety, and well-being of participants. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the agenda for the evening is, first, we're going to just quickly address some local media misinformation about the project. We're going to provide an overview of the project. We're going to describe its potential project impacts and mitigation measures. We're going to review the status of the Moreau site plan and the New York State DEC environmental permitting process. We're going to discuss project benefit and how it aligns with New York State's very aggressive climate leadership and Community Protection Act. And we're going to show you how you can access DEC permit application, project information, project contact information, and then we're going to have a public Q&A period, again, about 3 minutes per person if we could stick to that limit. Regarding some recent misinformation in the press over the last several months and online, this is a DEC mandated public information meeting to be hosted by us. It's not a DEC hosted meeting, and it's not a public hearing. Saratoga Biochar does not propose to land apply biosolids or handle them on land. SBS will handle or process biosolids inside the facility, not outside. SBS is not an ethanol refinery and is not anything like an ethanol refinery. And just because one of its owners worked as a contractor for an ethanol refinery in the past that had problems does not mean that that is us. That's a different company. PFAS can be and will be destroyed in our process. PFAS can also be captured in a properly designed air emissions control system such as we propose to install. Our technology is not new and untested. Thermal treatment, thermal oxidation, industrial air emissions control equipment have been in existence for many decades. Our primary manufacturer, based here in the United States, has been in business for 148 years, designing and installing thermal processing systems. And a key component of that system, which we'll review with you, is the thermal oxidation phase, which breaks down PFAS and volatile organic compounds. That's actually been designed by a process combustion company that's been in business since 1969 here in the United States. Some of the best, absolutely the best in the business in the US. SBS has field tested biosolids thermal treatment with our manufacturing partners, and we have tested gases released from the process and the carbon fertilizer output with third-party independent laboratories, and we're quite pleased with the results. State-of-the-art biosolids thermal processing facilities exist. There's one in Logan, Australia that opened just over almost 2 years ago. It's an excellent example. So this is not the first one in the world that has been claimed. Saratoga Biochar has retained experienced science and engineering talent for the design of its processing system, its emissions controls, facility design, and material handling. And a quick project overview. What we intend to do is build and operate a carbon fertilizer manufacturing facility on 5.89 acres in the Monroe Industrial Park. We will receive only non-hazardous biosolids feedstock from local and regional municipal wastewater treatment facilities and clean wood waste feedstock to manufacture carbon fertilizer for our beneficial use. We'll construct this facility in 3 phases over 5 years. This phased approach gives us the opportunity to be sure we're getting everything right, start small and build on success. The application to DEC was submitted in October of 2021 for 2 permits, a solid waste management facility permit and a state air facility permit. The reason that the waste management facility permit is needed is because biosolids are a regulated waste and a permit is required to handle them. The Monroe Planning Board approved our site plan with 16 environmental health and safety considerations in August of 2022. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner Bryce Meeker here to review the purpose of the project as well as some additional details.
Hi, I'm Bryce Meeker, President of Northeastern Biochar and Saratoga Biochar Solutions. Our project has several purposes, actually 6 here, very minimum, and we cover a lot of grounds. It's a unique business that takes in biosolids, a waste, and produces a fertilizer. Basically, it recovers resources that are currently wasted. I remember when I was your age, I was looking at flushing the toilet and wondering where it all went. Well, I wasn't satisfied with the answer, to be honest. We're here to displace dirty industries. Chemical fertilizer manufacturing itself is a very carbon-intensive industry. Most of it is made from natural gas or mined out of the earth. High in salt content, it's been killing soils for the past 80 years. We're also looking at displacing biosolids disposal solutions. The ones currently on the market, landfilling, incineration, land application. This is a technology that replaces those practices. And the benefit of it is we're also producing a product that sequesters carbon in the soil and helps to restore the soil. But doing that requires us to basically decontaminate the material because there are traces. I know there's a lot of hype about what's in biosolids. Well, there are traces of many contaminants that we approach, and they're all organic. And our process remediates those so that our fertilizer is clean and what we're putting in the soil benefits the soil. And the beauty of it all is it sequesters carbon. So not only are we offsetting these dirty industries, but we're also sequestering carbon long term. This is a long-term climate change technology that helps us move today and move the needle. If this is broadly adopted throughout the United States, we can move the needle with this. 1/3 of overall greenhouse gas emissions are coming from agriculture. And last but not least, it's about protecting human health. And we've got to find better solutions than what the status quo has today. And that's what this is all about today. We're not here to harm people. In fact, our whole mission here is to prove a technology, to demonstrate a new method that we hope utilities nationwide will adopt. And it all starts somewhere. And none of this is untested. We've tested it thoroughly. The scope of the facility layout, we'll be receiving feedstock. You'll see mainly biosolids will come through those main 2 tall doors there just next to the one. Wood waste feedstock will come very near to it and will be stored next to it. It'll be offloaded inside the building. So the trucks come up, they back in the building, doors shut, and they offload into an in-ground pit that's covered and under air treatment system, so there's no odors that escape or any kind of fugitive odors. Phase 3 is the manufacturing process. This is where we basically will perform the entire thermal treatment process. We dry it, we carbonize it, and then we treat the exhaust air thoroughly, as well as the water coming out of it. You'll see 3 has space for a couple extra future manufacturing lines. Well, we're doing this 1 phase at a time. A third of our capacity we'll start out with, then we'll double it, and then we'll add a 3rd line as we go along. And at each point, we've got to go back to the regulator and discuss the results from our permits to get permission to go forward. Same with the town. And ultimately, it ends up in the carbon storage bins outside, and we've also put it in bags. We put it on trucks and haul it away to farms. Last, off-site is the end users. Those basically will be farms, sod farms, greenhouses. This stuff is safe for food production. We've taken all the contaminants out of it. The next slide is on facility transport. We have a single hauler bringing everything to us. And that's intentional. It allows us to have very good control over the biosolids resources coming to us, and it guarantees the supply that will be there. The truck traffic is limited from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday. A maximum, this is once we've done all 3 phases, we anticipate a maximum of 50 trucks per day at the facility once the facility is completely built out. Just to give you a sense of comparison, the Monroe Industrial Park, the generic environmental impact study indicated the truck capacity of over 1,200 trucks per hour. So we're 50 trucks a day. The park is permitted for 1,200 trucks per hour. So 50 trucks per day is a small amount of traffic relative to what the industrial park is currently permitted to receive. Trucks follow established industrial park truck route as indicated on that map. We cannot deviate from it. We're not driving through towns. We're driving around on the dedicated route that the industrial park put together, I think, over 20 years ago. The biosolids will tip into a sealed concrete pit indoors. The entire pit is under air treatment. It's for temporary storage. We're required to have 3 days of storage supply to facilitate, not operating and receiving biosolids on Sundays and holidays. Ambient air from the receiving area and pits is treated by the emission control equipment for odor removal. In essence, the building is designed with negative air pressure to ensure that all fugitive odors are captured and brought into the air treatment system so that we don't become a nuisance to our neighbors. Our objective is not to get any odor plates, quite frankly, and that's the way we designed the facility. So just to run you through the process, as feedstock arrives at the facility, step 1, this coordinates with the diagram you saw previously of the facility. Feedstock is received either by truck, into a pit, or wood is received into piles. It is either rejected or it goes into the process. If it's rejected, the hauler has to take it off-site and dispose of it as they would ordinarily any kind of waste. We cannot take any waste that we're not permitted to receive. Nothing hazardous can come through our facility. We're not permitted to receive any hazardous waste. And if it doesn't meet our approval, it goes to off-site disposal. So if it does meet our approval, it goes into storage in the process, the feedstock, in the processing area, and it's distributed as carbon fertilizer, and it goes to an off-site end user as a fertilizer use. So the facility process is fairly simple. First and foremost is feedstock preparation. We blend the materials together, the wood and the biosolids, and we dry it. First step is very common. Many municipalities have biosolids dryers throughout the country. This is already happening, and it's already been distributed as a dried fertilizer product. To us, that's an intermittent product. From there, we take it to another step further. In essence, we take it to another step where we carbonize it. Carbonization is achieved through pyrolysis, and that is basically, think of it like baking it in an oxygen-free environment. You get up to temperature, the gas part of the volatile organic compounds, such as PFAS, as well as energy compounds, and numerous other compounds, are vaporized into a gas form. They're physically separated from the solids. Now this, in particular, provides an opportunity for things like PFAS, which are typically very difficult to destroy even through incineration. Once you strip it from the solids, it becomes a gas, and it's much more volatile. We then take it to an advanced thermal oxidation process, reaching 2,300 degrees. We don't want to exceed it any further, otherwise we'll start producing NOx. And nobody wants that. Again, that's a regulated air pollutant that does affect human health. PFAS is destroyed follows a gas stream, and is destroyed in the gas stream. And that gas stream is further taken through the dryer, where it dries the material, as a heat source. And then it travels through an air treatment system. It's a wet scrubbing system that uses, first and foremost, dry cyclones to recover as much of the material and run it back through the process. And then we capture any additional fine particles, dust particles, with a wet Venturi system that basically captures everything. And that wastewater that does contain traces of all these contaminants, because again, we're talking about the dried format, it goes back through our thermal oxidation process to be remediated. And the final thing, and then we run it through ammonia, sulfur, to reach sulfur compounds as well as ammonia compounds. And finally, a very innovative solution for odor treatment is bioscrubbers. And so we have a multi-stage system to ensure that all the air is treated not only for regulated air emissions, but also odors, because we don't want to have any issues, again, with odors in the community. So we have very limited sewer discharge. And the treated exhaust going to atmosphere has been through a very extensive air treatment system. So the project schedule, this is estimated. The environmental and building permits are looking to complete April and May this year. Phase 1 construction, we're looking to begin sometime in the fall, September to November, and to be complete within approximately 1 year, in December 2024. We look to have a soft start. The equipment installation should occur between October and December the following year. The facility startup will look to be December 24th. Phase 1 of the facility operating its capacity by May 2025. That's when we really look to see achieve commercial operations after a ramp-up period. Phase 2 construction, which will begin only after we've completed and been authorized by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to proceed with the second phase after stack testing of the first phase and then determining the actual emissions. Only then will be permitted to do to phase 3. Phase 2 construction, installation, startup, we're looking to be in the 2025, 2026, approximately 1 year after we finish the first line. And phase 3 would again be in 2026 to 2027. Again, that pends DEC's approval of the third phase. And that all depends on our performance with stack tests and emission testing to ensure that we're in compliance. So only once we've demonstrated we are in compliance can we actually proceed to phase 2 and phase 3. Expected operating life of the facility is easily 30 years. So we're looking 2024 to 2054. Potential impacts. Okay, the impacts on land have been looked at extensively. The project complies with applicable zoning and land use standards within the Moreau Industrial Park. No zoning variances were needed or applied for. Impacts on plants and animals. A generic environmental impact statement, GEIS, for the Moreau Industrial Park confirms no presence of threatened or endangered species. The impact on energy. The facility minimizes energy use by recovering waste heat and utilizing renewable synthesis gas, or syngas, for energy. In essence, we recover 68% of what it takes to dry the product in syngas that we produce from the product itself. Impacts on air. 3 stacks will emit regulated air emissions. Again, regulated air emissions. And the impacts on noise, odor, and light. The facility equipment and processes have potential to generate fugitive noise and odor. We've done our best to control them. All the operations are inside. Everything is within compliance in the town of Monroe. Impact mitigation. First and foremost, air emissions. Air pollution control systems consisting of advanced thermal oxidizer, cyclone separators, wet scrubbers, and bioscrubbers maintain air emissions below regulatory thresholds. Construction in phases provides the opportunity to confirm emissions and permit compliance before adding more capacity. So while it seems like we're adding a lot, 15% of state biosolids, one line is 5%, a third of the capacity. Emissions monitoring, testing, and reporting are all required for us to proceed through our 3 phases of construction. So this has been done very conservatively. We're not putting everything online at once. It's in a phased approach. Noise and odor. An enclosed building with negative air pressure and ventilation contains or manages noise and odors. And negative air pressure means if you open a door, air comes into the building. It doesn't go out of the building, it comes in. So when we open a garage door, the odors are sucked into the building. That's the objective for maintaining control over those odors and not letting them seep to the community. Noise and odor mitigation and continuous monitoring are required by the town of Monroe. It's part of our site plan approval that the town of Monroe gave us last August. Biosolids receiving, handling, and processing are all performed indoors. Everything, any biosolids received will be, we not only do it indoors, we bring the trucks inside, we shut the doors to make sure nothing can escape before unloading. And they're unloading into concrete pits in the ground that are also sealed once the truck leaves and is under negative pressure through our air treatment system. So the idea is we want full control over these odors. Air pollution control systems remove odors from the exhaust air, and they're basically guaranteed by the manufacturer for odor control and reduction. And the pyrolytic system, the thermal oxidizers can by a different manufacturer, but they're also guaranteed even the PFAS.
Can you repeat that, please? Can you repeat what you just said, please?
Yeah, our entire...
Concerning the manufacturers, so the manufacturers guarantee it?
Yeah, we have, I mean, we basically, our manufacturers are producing this, have performance guarantees associated with their scope of supply.
Question and answer period will begin at the end of the presentation. Yep, no problem.
Please,
Yep.
let us get through this presentation before questions. Local site plan review timeline, July 2021. We submitted a site plan application for the Town of Monroe Planning Board. August 2021 through August 2022, 9 planning board meetings, Town of Monroe. December 2021, first planning board public hearing. March 2022, planning board have completed the state environmental quality review with a negative declaration. May 2022, second planning board public hearing. August 2022, received site plan approval from the Town of Monroe Town Planning Board with 16 conditions. 16 conditions we have to abide by.
What are not enforceable?
Okay, again, please keep comments down until the comment and question and answer period, please.
Remember, you didn't do any handouts. How are we supposed to remember all of this information so we can ask intelligent questions at the end?
Write down your question, please, and ask it later. Listen, please, I'm trying to give a presentation here. Please have the wherewithal and courtesy to let me speak and go through it, please.
We were doing that for a long time already.
It's been 10 minutes.
The information is actually on the website.
And it's all there. The application, you can find it at the Town of Monroe. We put it on our website. A little digging, you can find all the answers. New York State DEC permit application status. Andrew?
Yep, thank you, Bryce. Again, my name is Andrew Millspaugh. I'm a professional engineer with Sterling Environmental Engineering out of Latham. We're assisting Saratoga Biochar with their permit applications with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And as Ray previously mentioned, those are 2 permits, one being a solid waste management permit under Part 360 of the regulations, and the other being an air state facility permit under Part 201 of the regulations. As part of the application process, there's a demonstration of consistency with the state and local solid waste management plans. which emphasize the diversion of waste, including biosolids, from landfill disposal, which is a majority of the current practice. There's also a demonstration of consistency with the new Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which also emphasizes the diversion of biosolids, organic waste from landfill disposal, and an emphasis on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. For the timeline, in October 2021, initial applications were submitted to the state. From that time period to today, we've been in a technical review process with the state, ongoing review and request for information. That's been with the folks for solid waste and with the air emissions. There's been ongoing back and forth. This has included detailed air emissions modeling from the facility for potential impacts on the surrounding community. Again, this is all still ongoing. In August of 2022, the DEC provided a notification to perform enhanced public participation, which is what these meetings are a part of. As Ray mentioned earlier, the Fort Edward is identified as a potential disadvantaged community, and Glens Falls and Hudson Falls are identified as environmental justice zones. The purpose of these meetings is to provide an opportunity to give information about the project to the community and have an opportunity for the community to make their comments, ask questions. As Ray mentioned, this all becomes part of the record for the DEC review. And just want to make it clear that the DEC review process is not complete. The application has not been deemed complete yet. When that happens, there will be notices published in the Environmental News Bulletin and in the local newspaper indicating that the application has been deemed complete, and there will be a separate comment period for that. That'll be an opportunity to submit comments directly to the DEC. And at the end of this presentation, there's also information on how to submit comments directly to the DEC at any time. Yep, you can move on. So as I mentioned, one of the parts of the application process is demonstration of consistency with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That was effective of January 2020. It has ambitious goals for reductions of greenhouse gases, one being a reduction of 40% by 2030, which is quickly approaching. As part of that timeline, there's a draft scoping plan for essentially a roadmap of how to get to those goals that was issued in December of 2021. There was a public comment period on that process, and the final scoping plan was issued in December of 2022. Guidance and regulations to implement the plan are still in development, but compliance is expected to achieve these goals that are quickly approaching in 2030. As I mentioned, some of those goals are diversion of organic waste and biosolids from landfill disposal and the associated greenhouse gas reductions with the disposal process, of which this application and this project helps achieve. Yep, you can go to the next slide. So as part of that consistency assessment is the greenhouse gas reduction, and an update from the last meeting that was held in December to this meeting was the completion of an independent life cycle greenhouse gas analysis, which is available on the document repository. That was performed by eco-engineers and was issued final in February of this year. And it gives an accounting of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the project and the diverted greenhouse gas emissions associated with this type of disposal practice. And if you read the assessment and go through the analysis and the conclusions, it demonstrates that this process has a net greenhouse gas reduction of 137%. This facility achieves the goal of reducing the biosolids disposal in landfills, and there's some statistics here that show how this matches up with current disposal practices in the state. And a second part of the consistency assessment does include an assessment of potential impacts on disadvantaged communities, which is why there's the enhanced public participation and the in-depth review of the air emissions for potential dispersion around the facility. That's all currently under review. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ray.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew mentioned, we'll provide some additional information here on accessing information. So we have a document repository and project website. It was stood up in December of 2022. This presentation that you're seeing here today is basically the same one that was provided virtually in December of 2022, and it's on that website, saratogabiochar.com/PPP, Public Participation Plan. We also have a social media site on Facebook, Saratoga Biochar. Additionally, if you'd like to submit comments, I'm going to leave this slide up at the end if you need to write this down, because there's a bit more information here. Region 5 Warrensburg, sub-office of New York State DEC in Warrensburg, and there's an address that you can email there. You can also call. Project identification is Carbon Fertilizer Manufacturing, Saratoga Biochar, and there's an application number there. Really, I think it's gained enough attention. You don't really need to give them the application number, but I'll go back to that slide and leave it up for you. But on the note of the volume of information covered in the slides, I'm happy to flip back through them. If there's something that you thought you saw, and you want me to go back until you see it again and ask about it, happy to do that, no problem. Let's not get hung up on that. Project contacts within our company, we have an info@saratogabiochar.com email address. We tagged Bryce as it. You can email him directly or call him, and then our mailing address is there as well. So with that, we're going to break here for the public comment and question period. And again, as I said at the beginning, we're turning it over here to Rob of Technical Video to sort of administer that, and he's going to do his best to take questions from people in the room here live, and also from people that are participating by Zoom, and also people who may have only called in and have audio only, which will be the tricky part, but we'll do our best to get through that. Somewhere around here we have a microphone stand, which we're going to put up right in the center here. So what we'd like to do is ask people to come up and use the microphone so that everyone and us can hear you. And again, I want to refer back to sort of the rules of the road. The DEC requires this meeting and makes it the information available for the communities of Hudson Falls, Fort Edward, and the city of Glens Falls, those areas of those communities that fall within a 2-mile radius of the facility. If you're from those areas, you would have received a mailing, and also within disadvantaged environmental justice zone. That said, it's a public meeting. It's here for everybody. I recognize there might be a couple people from Moreau in the room, so we'd like to hear from you too. But again, given the DEC's requirements for this meeting, we'd like to ask that you give the local residents from Hudson Falls, Fort Edward, and Glens Falls the first shot at the mic, if you would be so kind. But I think we've allowed enough time for this meeting. We should be able to get through a lot. So with that said, I would encourage anyone who would like to get up and ask a question or make a statement to go ahead and do so now. Rob's gonna call. Rob's gonna call on you, sir. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And please state your name and where you're from, if you're from one of the areas.
Yep, just name and the town you're from.
My name is Beth Ann Wadley. I live in Fort Edward. I have one comment to make, and that's it.
Okay.
Well, you may go a little bit. I have a question for you.
Okay.
In your statement tonight, you said, it's not like we'll be driving through towns. I live in the town of Moreau with a Fort Edward mailing address. I live around the corner from where you're going to build. So you are driving through my town. That's my town. Those are my roads that I travel every day. So, sir, it is my town. And it is many of these people's town. How many people live in the town where the trucks are going to drive through, in the town of Moreau? We're a town. You will be driving through our town. So am I also to believe that the Post-Star, everybody's a liar except for you guys? I don't know any of you. You want me to trust you? You don't even respect my town enough to even acknowledge that we live there and we are a community. You don't even care about that. My other question is, 2021, none of us had heard anything about biochar. And when you say that you're going to present it as you have to legally in the paper, are you going to bury it into the part of the paper that nobody reads unless they're, in foreclosure or tax trouble or whatever? No one reads that. No one even hardly reads a Post-Star at all anymore, or written print. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that written print as we know it is not the way it was. You don't reach as many people, obviously. So I find the whole thing to just be really shady. I find the whole thing, our town supervisor in this deal is really shady because none of us knew. Why did no one even tell us? It's our town. And that's all I'm saying.
Would you like us?
Next.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Rob?
Hold on. There was no question.
There was no answer.
She just vented.
Okay, Mary, we're going to be going to you. Please be ready to unmute yourself in a moment.
Give Rob a moment. He's teeing up a remote participant to join soon.
Maybe we give precedence to the people here.
I'm sorry, Mary. Hang on 1 second.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Yeah.
Good evening, thank you. I was wondering who the one trucking company or hauling company is that you will be using and where they're based out of?
The trucking company? Who is
Oh,
hauling?
primary construction company for the, trucking company is Casella Organics, a division
you.
of Casella Waste Systems, a subsidiary of.
Based out of, the second part of the question was based out of where?
Sorry, can't hear you.
Where's it based out of? The second part of her question was, what's the trucking company, where are they based out of?
Thank you very much. Do we have Casella in the room here to take that question?
I
We
believe
thought we
we
might
do.
have Casella here today. We don't. Okay.
No, Patrick.
Oh, sorry, Patrick. Thank you. Yep.
Go ahead. Sure.
I think if you're loud enough, the question was, where is Casella Organics based out of? And I'm assuming Maine, but I'm not sure exactly if that's part of it.
It's a publicly traded company with corporate office in Rutland, Vermont. We obviously locally have an office on Route 9.
Thank you.
And by the way, that's our only hauling partner, period.
Please.
Gentlemen, first, thank you for being here.
Yeah, if you could
and
just,
answering-
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you would kindly state your name and what town you're from.
I'm Tom Masso. I do live in Moreau, but I think this question pertains to everyone in Fort Edward as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for answering questions and concerns. I have a couple comments and one question that pertains to those comments, so bear with me. The fundamental problem with this project is a lack of trust between the community and biochar. And you can see it right here. It is the result of a process short on independent scientific data, relying more on a slick marketing campaign by biochar to convince everyone that eliminating harmful contaminants, such as PFAS, through pyrolysis is a foregone conclusion. If this was not the first time a project of this size was built anywhere in the U.S. with a projected scope to process over 200,000 tons of biosolids annually, if biochar's leadership team had a track record of success with similar projects rather than, quite frankly, 0 for Mr. Appy and 2 failed projects in Nebraska and Iowa.
I'm going to ask you to pause right there. Could you please be specific about what you're accusing my partners of?
It was a lengthy discussion about projects that failed in Nebraska and Iowa in the Glens Falls Post-Star. I would have to refer you to that article.
I'm very aware of the article. I just wanted to be clear.
Okay.
And since you've accused them of something that you maybe believe is true, I'd like Lee and Bryce to be able to answer that.
That's fine. Let me finish my question and
Sure.
they can answer.
Yep,
Thank
sure.
you. If the Moreau Town Planning Board had not chosen to ignore 2 unanimous resolutions in December of 2021 and May of 2022 to contract with outside experts to evaluate biochar's process with the goal of creating an environmental impact statement, if the EPA and a distinguished geochemistry experts like Professor David Walker at Columbia University had not raised serious questions on the safety and viability of eliminating PFAS through pyrolysis, if New Windsor and Wallkill, New York hadn't already rejected this project, if the town supervisor, Mr. Kuznaras, had not received numerous political contributions from entities associated with this project, including Casella, then maybe, just maybe, the local community might be able to get behind this. The result of all this obfuscation by biochar and some officials in the town of Moreau is that ordinary citizens like me, with no training in geochemistry or environmental science, have been forced to become knowledgeable in geochemistry and environmental science, terrified that this project will move forward without serious evaluation by independent experts. There is no way that the citizens of Moreau and the surrounding community should bear the burden of becoming experts so that we can ask legitimate questions relative to the efficacy and safety of biochar's proposed operation. I have one example. Stands out in my mind. On December 19th, you had a public meeting online. Rachel Kenyon Lennox, a young environmental scientist, asked a knowledgeable question about the scalability of this project, pointing out that for pyrolysis to be effective, heat has to be applied evenly throughout each batch of biosolids, something that none of us would have any knowledge of. 3 times, Ms. Kenyon Lennox asked biochar's representatives for the size of the batches previously tested. 3 times she didn't get an answer, a direct answer. Mr. Wolfkill, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, indicated that the test batches include 4 semi-trucks or 80 tons roughly of biosolids over 4 years. But he could not provide the test batch size that Ms. Kenyon Lennox was looking for. As information to all, if biochar's Moreau plant ever reaches full capacity, they will process up to 1,000 tons of biosolids per day in large, dense batches. There is a serious question here about scalability from test batch to full production size. At a minimum, this project must be suspended until the town of Moreau can retain an independent expert to fully evaluate the process and develop a comprehensive EIS. So with that, thank you for bearing with me. Here's my question. I know we're late in this process, but with all the questions and concerns by the local community, will biochar now support contracting with an independent expert to fully evaluate this project and develop a comprehensive EIS?
No. No, we're not just going to go and do that because, and here's why. You can talk about your distrust or dislike of the town's planning board process. I'm not part of the town planning board. We filed the application, we filed the rules and guidelines to get through that. They consulted with DEC and a number of other independent experts, including their own town designated engineer about water, wastewater, traffic, truck traffic, technology, emissions controls, all of those things. And there's a record, almost 5,000 pages of that 13-month process, which Ms. Fritsch has challenged here in court, as you know. And so at this point, it's with the Saratoga County Supreme Court to decide if that, I gave you your time, to decide if that was appropriately handled or not. So the judge will decide whether or not that was. And in addition to that, we filed applications with New York DEC, which Sterling Environmental has helped us with. We followed the letter of the law, and they have given it an incredibly in-depth review, again, for over a year. And so at the end of the day, if the New York State DEC approves our permits because they agree with the technology and they believe that what we have proposed, what our engineers for our manufacturers have proposed and given us assurances of will work, they're going to give us a permit and it's going to have very strict compliance thresholds. If we don't meet those thresholds, we get shut down. So who's at risk here?
Who's going to enforce those thresholds?
The
So
New
you're
York
saying
State
the DEC
Department of
does-
Environmental Conservation.
No, they're not. They're not. They haven't done
I want to
it
have
in the
Andrew
past.
discuss how DEC enforces permit
You're
compliance.
right. You're right. But here's, let me just, that was an interesting statement. Let me just point this out. The planning board voted 4-2. They essentially abdicated their responsibility to evaluate this project. If you guys are convinced that this stuff works, and maybe I'm wrong, if you guys are convinced, why not reassure this community, everyone seated here, and say, look, we want an independent expert to come up here, evaluate the process, pay, I assume you'll pay for it because you were going to pay for it when the 2 times when the board voted that they were going to go ahead, and then reassure everybody. If you get an expert up here and he says, I've looked at this is fine, this is safe, I'm behind you. I support it. I think it's great. But why not take that step to reassure the community that what you're doing is not going to harm the water, the air of this community, the safety of families and children that live around that plant? Why wouldn't you do that?
If I may, I don't work for Saratoga Biochar. I am, working on their behalf to assist with their permit applications. But I am a professional engineer in the state of New York, independently review their application data, independently correspond with their manufacturers who review this bench scale data to design the processes, the dryers, the pyrolysis kilns, the thermal oxidizers. Those are all separate entities reviewing this data to design this process. I'm putting the permit applications together, reviewing that data, asking their questions, corresponding with the various entities involved. That then gets submitted to the DEC, who then they ask questions, they review the documents. So this isn't all being conducted in a vacuum of Ray, Bryce, and Lee. There's a lot of other entities involved that are independently reviewing this, asking questions, going through. There's a lot of information on the document repository, and some of the concerns that are here, particularly what I'm hearing is around PFAS. There is data in those documents of testing of biosolids and testing of the output, the biochar, for PFAS compounds, so to demonstrate proof of concept. So it's not all thoughts. There is rationale, there is engineering, there is data behind it. So I do want to give you some comfort there that there are people who aren't. I mean, I get paid either way, for working for them. The project can fail, the project can succeed. But I am reviewing that data, putting it in applications and submitting it, and it is being reviewed. So I just want to give you some faith in the process that there are entities other than these applicants reviewing this.
But as an engineer, proof of concept is not full operation. And so we still don't know if this process will, maybe you can answer one question, probably an easy question. What is the standard batch size you guys are going to run?
It's a continuous
It's a continuous process, right.
It's not a batch process at all.
All right. So it's continuous operation, but there will be how many tons of product in the operation at a time? 20, 30, 50?
10 tons per hour, continuous process. And that's actually the magic of back to your point about the technical expert that you referenced who expressed concern about the ability to evenly heat those materials. When they're churning through a giant drum, and that's continuously going from one end to the other over a 50-foot length for about 20 minutes. The inside of that has fluting. Those materials are constantly churned and turned all the way down 50 feet through a heated tube, basically. That's the pyrolysis chamber. So that provides all of the agitation, separation, and even heating that is needed.
All right. Well, I've stood up here long enough. I think you have other people.
Those are great questions, though. And if others in the audience feel that you're representing them well, I'm happy to continue. But I do think you referenced a couple of points made in a newspaper recently that that makes my two partners appear as criminals, and that's absolutely untrue. And I'd like to have them have an opportunity. If you want to,
I'm going to respond, but I want to hear what they have to say. Sure.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
So if you're referring in Iowa, in Iowa, I've been running an operation there, sold it 3 years ago successfully, and I more or less spread 100,000 tons of biosolids every year. I got sued for odor complaint just because some biosolids were stockpiled longer than they should have been, over a month. That's what the lawsuit was about. It was odor. It was out in the open. I dealt with it. I took care of it. There was not a notice violation assessed to me. I never had anything in my whole 27 years of operations with any NOV. Everything was done correctly, everything was spread correctly, and moved on. 14 years later, I still never had an issue. So I had a problem.
Is that operation still running?
Yes, another guy bought it off of me. But he bought the business name, so it's still in operation.
Thank you, Lee. So one odor complaint in 23 years of Lee's ownership of that company.
What
I
about
don't
the
think that makes,
Nebraska?
I don't,
what about
and
the-
he corrected the problem. I
What
don't think
about the
that, I don't think that
Nebraska
makes him a
operation?
bad person.
What about the Nebraska operation?
I was a consultant there. I was a 1099 income. I was never an employee, never had ownership, never had any decision-making authority. That was I was really,
You know, and okay, so this is what I mean about trust. When you folks showed up here, these operations were what you cited as the reason why you knew what you were doing. One had at least one lawsuit, and I have to remember because there was a settlement that somebody had health claims who lived nearby a farm. I don't know if it was, was it Iowa? It was Iowa. What about that family that lived next door that got sick?
Yeah, they were not sick. They were all, literally, I went through it. There was the lawsuit, more or less, how can I say this without putting numbers out there? More or less, they settled on a half of a Prius car in total dollar amount.
But they settled. You settled with them.
Yeah, but they were going for millions of dollars.
And they moved, I believe.
No, they're still in the same town of Holy Cross.
Are they in the same place?
What's that?
Are they in the same place on the farm next to the operation?
They sold their farm for $9,600 an acre and moved uptown.
Okay. But again, you're talking about Nebraska. When you guys came here, this was what you said was your expertise, and now you're a consultant and you weren't really involved. That was shut down by the Nebraska EPA, was it not?
So I want Bryce to respond to that, but let me question your question. So in his mid-30s, he works for a large corporation as an independent consultant, and he's brought in to help with an operation, and he sees what they're doing, and that becomes part of his work experience in his life. And he takes the good from it and the bad and recognizes the problems and moves on and tries to do something better. Does that make him responsible or a bad person?
What I'm suggesting
Or a
is,
fast learner.
I hope so, but what I'm suggesting is that these projects, when you first got here in 2021 or whenever, you were citing them as a justification for this project based on your experience. Well, we know there were lawsuits for one. We know this one was shut down. So, okay, maybe you did not have a really involved experience in the Nebraska project. Then why cite it?
Well, because that's his experience. He spent years working for a
but it
company
was-
that builds corn ethanol plants. That's a carbon
But it was-
manufacturing facility.
It was cited as a positive example, and it's been shut down.
I don't think that's correct. I don't think that project was cited as a positive example. It was referenced
Cited
as
as
work
experience.
experience. Okay?
As it was.
And let me ask you this.
Yeah.
In life, have you learned more from your successes or your failures?
You want to have a philosophical question here. I've learned from everything, but I've learned to be suspicious.
I can't hear you. Can you speak up, please?
Excuse me. I've learned from experience that when people make pronouncements about what they have accomplished in their life, to be skeptical. And I'm skeptical of you
should
fellas.
be.
Thanks for your input.
Skepticism.
Hey, Rob, are we getting somebody remotely now? You want me to?
No, let's take another.
Okay, thank you. Please. Tracy Fritsch.
Hi, I'm known to you, Tracy Frisch, Town of Argyle, Chair of Clean Air Action Network of Glens Falls. So I have 2 points. The first is that there's no reason for the Upper Hudson to become a waste ground. We already have a trash incinerator way bigger than was needed 30 plus years ago. We don't need downstate and western New England sewage sludge. But what I want to talk about is the problems with detecting, the problems with PFAS. So, and I don't believe that the way you described it is accurate. I've been studying this, I've been watching webinars with EPA and other research scientists. PFAS has very strong carbon-fluorine bonds, which is why they're hard to destroy. These carbon-fluorine bonds are not found in nature. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. The poly means there's many. Typical PFAS chemical has chlorine backbone with 2 fluorines on each carbon.
Are the strengths of those bonds different from one form to another?
The strengths of the carbon-fluorine bonds are
They different?
I don't.
Point being, does it matter? If we can break the carbon-fluorine bond, what does
Okay,
it matter?
but let me just say,
Which compound?
the temperature that has been identified for breaking this carbon-fluorine bond is 2,642 degrees.
Where's your site on that? Where's your
It's an
I will
EPA,
get-
it's an
I will
EPA
get you
study.
one. Yes, it's EPA
It's an
research.
opinion.
EPA research scientists. Okay. And so the reason
And they were incinerating biosolids in that study?
Yes.
Was it
There's-
incineration or thermal oxidation?
they're talking about pyrolysis, they're talking about any kinds of processes after pyrolysis to break down these bonds.
Can she finish what she has to say? You're interrogating her.
Yes.
Sure.
You're all very rude.
Okay, that is number one. Number two, there is no approved testing method for air. There's an experimental testing method. DEC, New York State has one standard for a PFAS in air, and that is PFOA. However, it is my reading and my consultation with experts, when you heat PFAS, there's thermal degradation and products of incomplete combustion. And what that means is the PFAS will have other functional pieces on the end. So they might be alcohols, they might have sulfur in them, they might have oxygen. There's other pieces. Those will come off. And what happens is the PFAS, products of incomplete combustion, recombine into novel PFAS. There are between 9,000 and 14,000 PFAS compounds. When water is tested, they test for 15, 30, 40, at most 100. So we're not testing for most of the compounds that exist. When they test air, they test for far fewer. And New York State has a standard for one type of PFAS, PFOA, which is hysterical given that there are dozens, hundreds of different things that can come out of the stacks. So there is no way to say, so this is one point, there is no way to say we're not emitting any PFAS because it can't be tested for, and certainly not continuously. The other point, and I'm forgetting this.
Take your time.
I'm sorry.
Take your time.
Okay.
That's 3 minutes already.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Excuse me? Yeah, let me just see.
You can speak again if you'd like to gather your thoughts.
Well, I just think any claims that the other point is that when EPA research scientists attempted to figure out what happens at a sewage sludge biochar plant with the PFAS that comes with the sewage sludge, or biosolids, which is really similar. It was a linguistic detoxification term that came out of the PR industry to call them biosolids. In any case, when they did the study in California trying to determine what happened to the PFAS, they couldn't figure it out, and there's a number of reasons for that. One is the fact that testing is in its infancy for air, for PFAS. Okay. Number two, you cannot say PFAS disappears unless you can figure out what happens to the fluorine. Fluorine is an element. We're not dealing with alchemy here, so the fluorine has to be accounted for. If they can't figure out where the fluorine goes, they cannot say the PFAS just vanished. They don't know what it became. If it becomes a fluorine hydrogen, I guess it's an acid, that's a very toxic air pollutant. We don't know what it becomes under your process. We don't know if it goes into the water. We don't know any of these things because number one, it's not to scale, and number two, you have not provided the data on what happens to the PFAS and what happens to the fluorine. And that is needed to be known before anyone could say with a straight face that this process destroys PFAS. And if DEC does not address this, we will make sure it's addressed before any permits are issued, any final permits. This is the last thing we need up here.
Thank you, Tracy, and I apologize for interrupting you. I just was trying to not get too far out in the field before having a chance to answer. There were some very specific things. I think Andrew has some feedback for you.
Just a couple responses to a couple of those points. On the topic of the concern of PFAS and biosolids, I can confidently say that that is being heard by DEC and is being reviewed. There has been draft permits for air circulated, which have requirements for PFAS compounds. To the comment on there's no testing method for air or that it's in its infancy, there is a test method for testing in air. It's not a certified test method, which is common in the process of developing test methods. It was how the test methods for water, for PFAS in water started out. Laboratories do the test method. They're not certified by the EPA, then they become certified by the EPA, but that doesn't mean that the data coming out of it isn't valid data. So there is a method for testing for PFAS compounds in air. It is going through that process of becoming a certified process, but there is a testing method for that. And in the overall context, there's a lot of discussion about PFAS compounds right now. There's a lot of awareness about it, and that is understood, that is good. The concentrations that are in raw biosolids coming in are low. This isn't an industrial process. This isn't a Norlite taking in firefighting foam. This isn't a facility working with chemicals and pure PFAS. There's concentrations in the biosolids. They're low-level concentrations, and there is data that supports that pyrolysis does volatilize it out of the solids. The solid fraction going out as biochar does not contain the PFAS, and the gases, when incinerated in the thermal oxidizer, are adequate temperature and residence time to destroy the PFAS compounds. So this is being reviewed, this is being considered, and the comments are heard.
I'd like to add to that.
Can I just say, what does that test method, that experimental test method, because when I watched these webinars, they were saying we spent a lot of time trying to figure out a better way of testing because this was not adequate. What PFAS compounds do they test for?
Test for, well, I don't have it right in front of me. There's a list similar to water and soils. So, PFAS 21 compounds, 30 compounds.
Right,
so
right. But there is that recombination which isn't being taken into account. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to address your issue of why PFOA is the one that everybody's focused on, and you seem to be looking at that singularly. PFOA is the most difficult to destroy, to thermally treat. That's usually why it's used as sort of the determining constituent in these, when you're talking about PFAS, and for PFOA is the most difficult, and I know that from experience. So that's just to answer your question of why that one is singled out versus all the other varieties. They're a lot easier to destroy than PFOA.
Well, given the behavior of this family of chemicals, I think it's grossly inadequate. And I know very well about the level of PFAS in biosolids because I'm
the traces, correct?
Parts per billion. EPA's latest maximum contaminant level, which is a draft that came out in March for drinking water, is 4 parts per trillion.
For drinking water?
Yes, that's 1,000 times lower, but PFAS in the air gets deposited into the ground. When it comes out of a stack, deposited on the ground, it leaches readily through the soil into groundwater. And we know that from North Bennington, where there was a plastics factory or a plastic Teflon coating factory or something. Mm-hmm. And that's why it was dispersed far and wide. and all these,
Significant
all the-
thresholds there. That's not
all-
a trace source. That's a major source. They're making it and are using
they
it
weren't making it, they were
they're applying
applying
it to
it, they were
using it.
applying it as coating, just like
to like food packaging
no,
and things like
no,
that.
it was similar, it was I think it was St. Gobain, but I'm confused because there's a bunch of St. Gobains. One was in Hoosick Falls, but I think the one in North Bennington was. And people were confused. I'm a freelance writer, and another writer for one of the publications said, we didn't know how it gets into these private rural wells. And I'm like, we do know. There was dispersion model from St. Gobain in Ireland. We know very well that goes out in the air, comes down. So it's very complicated.
Okay. I can't comment on what filtration and air treatment they had at that facility or what. I mean, so.
Okay, we're going to get right to you. We do have a remote participant that's ready to go. Can we wait just a minute? Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Rob. And make sure our volume's high so we can hear. Should we go to another live question, Rob, before we're
No,
you ready to go? Okay. Tracy, while we're waiting for that participant to join, I just would mention that I've been watching this too, and I think where the testing methodology is going is to total organofluorines, because it comprehensively looks at all of it.
Yes, that's where it's going, and yes, I was at a PFAS webinar this afternoon.
Okay, hands off the Hudson. If you're not ready with a question, we will go to Britt. I will be sending you a request to unmute yourself in one moment. No volume.
I'm here.
There we go. Please go ahead. State your name, please, and where you live.
My name is Brittany. I live right on Danford Road in the town of Moreau.
Thank you.
So my question is, just by a show of hands for the 4 people that I see sitting up on the panel, how many of you live in direct contact with one of these facilities?
That's a facetious question. She's like, who lives in one of these, directly around one of these facilities?
I mean, it's just a general question.
This
and how
is
many
the
of you
first facility we're
would
building,
build-
so it hasn't been built yet. So I'm still trying to understand your question.
Yeah, if you could, was your
Well,
question?
that's my first question. My second question is, how many of you are willing to build a home in the town of Moreau directly next to one of these facilities?
Well,
To this facility?
I would have no
problem.
I would not hesitate, but I already have a home, and I'm not planning to.
And we'll be there all the time, you know. Not a
Okay,
problem
and then
with
my
it.
third
I have not
question
a
is
problem with
just,
it.
I'm confused why, or I guess my question is, as I've been listening, the answer continually seems to be, we don't have that in front of us, we don't have that in front of us, we don't have that in front of us. It seems like everybody in the audience is very prepared with what they want to ask. I am confused, and like my question back to you is, why aren't you guys prepared with every possible answer to defend what you want to bring to this community?
I'm very prepared to answer any question you put before me. What's your question?
In response to every other person's question before me, where the information was, we don't have that information in front of us.
I think that was said
haven't
once
said
by
that.
Andrew. Andrew, what was that? Do you recall what that was in reference to? That we need
All the PFAS compounds in the air testing method.
all the PFAS compounds in the air testing method. Yeah, we don't have that right here. We probably would spend an hour or two going through it if we had it. So I'm sorry we can't answer that one question at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question.
Okay. Please, the gentleman in the 4th row there has been waiting.
Hi, my name is Eric Paust. We've met before.
Yep.
Yeah.
Question. Did I hear incorrectly at the last public meeting? Continuous monitoring, air monitoring,
Yes.
yes or no?
Yes.
Done by,
Done by Well, the DEC
Yourselves?
No.
Who operates the
third-party,
continuous monitoring every single day?
no,
For what?
No, that's, you want
Andrew,
Air
best-
quality
I want Andrew
monitoring.
best prepared for that.
Right.
So-
You're the engineer. Who is doing the monitoring? My
Yeah.
question basically is Saratoga Biochar monitoring themselves? Or is there a third party who has nothing to do with DEC or Saratoga Biochar doing the daily monitoring, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Yes or no?
Yeah, the way these are typically worked out is that there has to be a quality control plan developed for review by the state agency for how the monitoring is going to be performed. What equipment's going to be installed, how is it going to be calibrated, how's it going to be operated, how's it going to be maintained on that continuous basis for the parameters to be monitored, for stack emissions, for the pollution control equipment, the scrubbers, the thermal oxidizer. That all gets put together in a plan for how it is going to be done for review to ensure that the data that is generated from the monitoring is valid data, that it's representative of the emissions and the controls, and that it provides assurance on an ongoing basis that it's representative of the process. So to the question of, is it a third party? Typically it's a third party because it's specialized, it's specialized equipment, it requires calibration. It's not something that anyone off the street typically can just come in and do. So most companies would contract that to a third party who does that on a regular basis, that's what they do.
Not paid by Saratoga Biochar.
Well, it wouldn't be paid for by
No,
by
I mean
anyone
that
else.
employee that is reporting the numbers is not on Saratoga Biochar's payroll.
I can't answer that.
So
you don't know.
What's your point?
So basically
What's your
my
point?
question is,
So,
who is doing the
Other
monitoring?
than the regulator
You haven't answered
and
it
the
yet.
third party that we're hiring to do
Right,
the
who's that
test.
third party?
So it'll be a qualified
My question is, who's that third party? What's the secret? Who cares? Why
We've
can't
gotta
we contact them?
The DEC has to approve of whoever we choose to do that.
Who'd
It's
you
got to
choose?
be a qualified.
We haven't got our permits yet, so we haven't been able to choose that.
So
But it
you
is a
you
third
want to build a
party.
plant, but you've got all your other bases covered.
We're doing-
Why haven't you covered this base?
Our permit is incomplete yet.
But you've covered all your other bases. You've answered everybody else's questions. You know the process that you're doing. But
Well, I
you have to be
answered my
monitored, but you're
question.
not thinking down the road, well, who are we going to hire to monitor?
No, we are.
Oh, well, then who are they?
As a matter of fact, Andrew sent me several weeks
Why
ago.
hide the answer? What are you afraid of? You should not have a problem telling us who is going to do the monitoring.
I'm going
It's
to
not
try.
going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt us.
No,
Nobody gets hurt
I can tell you who we've had do monitoring in the past, Montrose Environmental.
in the past. Who's doing this project? Who's going to
It'll
monitor
likely,
this
there,
project?
that's one, but we haven't.
Why
picked every-
not?
All right, could we?
Because
could
that's
we-
a minor detail we don't need to do today.
It's a minor
That's something
detail.
once
Bryce.
we're up and running, we
Bryce,
will
let me-
have.
Andrew, what's the acceptable level of PFAS eliminated, from a stack currently under New York state law? What's the acceptable level?
The way the acceptable levels are done, it's based on the dispersion. So you have to do the modeling of the emission standard and then extrapolate that to the stack. So the current standard, I'll have to pull it up and I can tell you before you leave, because again, I don't have it right in front of me.
I get
can-
that, but
Yep.
is the number 0?
No, the number is not 0.
So it means there's going to be some amount
No, it means there
greater
could,
than 0.
It means there could be.
No,
there could be.
There's going to be some amount greater than 0 because even the state of New York says some amount greater than 0 is acceptable.
Based on risk assessment, and yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, based
so
on the
everybody
law,
understand
yeah.
that
Okay.
they don't know the number obviously because they're not up and running. But New York State says whatever the number is, greater than 0. I don't know about you all, but any number, whatever that number is, greater than 0 is not okay with me.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Did you drive here?
Bryce.
Yes.
Bryce. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the question. And so we will, when we receive our permits, and then we know what we're going to be required to test for and how often and all that, then we will line up the appropriate third-party contractor.
And we've used
And-
Montrose Environmental in the past, and we could use them again.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm Therese Gillis, Fort Edward resident.
What's your name again? Therese?
Therese
Therese.
Gillis. Really, I'm probably better without a mic.
Yeah,
But
sometimes it
really,
gets in
you
the
don't
way.
intimidate me at all. There are
Not trying to.
two questions. One question that was said earlier was that all odors were going to be controlled. I think that was by you. You probably
Yes.
said that 3 times in your presentation. And then on the back page, I had to write that you were really going to do your best to control those odors. That's your quote. That just seems a little bit conflicting because there are going to be odors. And we all know about odors from the trash plant. I know all about PCB odors because I lived across from the dredging project for GE. Now I'm just going to read because otherwise we all get very passionate about.
Speak into that microphone.
We all get very passionate about this situation because we do live here and we've been inundated with previous pollution to this. I know. You said that, hang on. Today, I was listening in on DAC communities, and you said that Fort Edward is cited as a DAC community. It is not. Hudson Falls is.
I
Right
think I
here.
referred to the 3 communities, the city of Glens Falls, Hudson Falls, and Fort Edward.
It wasn't
The
you
3 of
that
them
said it.
combined are either or both
No, you
EJ
said
or
that.
DAC.
You
Well,
said that.
then I apologize for the
No,
misquote.
you said that, and you were correct. He said that Fort Edward was a disadvantaged community, which it is not. Hudson Falls is.
Thank you.
Just so you know.
Thank you for the clarification.
If you dig deep enough, you too can find these facts. I can't
Thank
believe
you.
you said that in a public meeting, but it's all right. Hopefully we had a good turnout, which we did. And it's very nice that this is a hybrid, online and in-person meeting, because I was at the December meeting and it was horrible. You could not get your questions answered. It didn't work. So it's good that we're all here tonight. And thank you that our voices and concerns are being heard. Keep them up, everybody. It's a regional issue. It's imperative the residents of Fort Edward, Hudson Falls, and Glens Falls move forward with the town of Monroe. This most probably should have taken place before this all got passed by the town board and the planning board, but this is where we are. So we'll keep moving. And maybe we'll have to revisit a few items. Even if you guys don't think we need to revisit a few items, I think we're going to have to revisit a few items because we have a whole region who's really interested in this project now. Further industrial development that brings waste products containing additional pollutants will continue to degrade our environment. This cannot be allowed. We can voice our concerns and comments to prioritize the health and well-being of the communities in this ecosystem. Once again, after this public meeting, comments and concerns need to be addressed and then come back to the table like we're trying to do. And you have come up with some answers probably since our last meeting. There's still an urgency to revisit the seeker negative declaration on your application. I know that the planning board didn't think that was important, but it's obvious that a lot of community members and hopefully the DEC will agree. I don't agree with simply raising the stacks and adding a filter to negate the issue of the emissions of ammonia and sulfur dioxides that might put you over the negative impact on air. Because as Tracy was saying, what goes up must come down somewhere, and golly gee, I'm in Fort Edward, about 2 miles the way that wind blows. So another level of review is required and justified before this DEC permit is granted. And you guys are looking at a timeline for May for this all being accepted. Is that still, you think you'll have an answer by May from DEC?
Well, I sure hope so.
Because then we got to really get busy with DEC. More pressure than what we've put on DEC.
So Therese, thank you. I think we're approaching.
I'm not over 3 minutes.
No, I'm going to give.
Okay.
I'm not taking the mic away from you. I just
Thanks.
on that. I just think that we're approaching the point where our application will be deemed complete. They'll open the public comment period, and then it's go time for DEC to
And
make
then
make
is
a
there-
decision. So
And there is a public comment period?
yes, 30 days. Yep.
Okay, again, okay.
Yep.
In monitoring, your odor needs to be mandatory. I think that was the first time that I've heard continuous monitoring. I was involved in some of that type thing with the GE dredging project. And it was difficult to dig deep enough and find the results of everything that was going on every day, but it could be done. I did it as an East Road resident. It's also odor. I know you're using a negative pressure system, but odors are very difficult to be controlled. I don't know what they use at the burn plant, but odors are there. They're not easily reported, measured, nor resolved. And biosludge really doesn't smell good. I met some guys on a cruise that maybe were neighbors of where you were, and they were farmers and had used biosludge and said, you know, the odors were incredible. It was different than cow manure. Being from Washington County dairy farms, I'm familiar with that. So it is different. The traffic study needs to be revisited. It was done 20 or 25 years ago, like you said. The numbers that you threw out, that's ridiculous. Nobody can handle that much traffic. There was a local veterinarian who was being required to do an impact study on increased traffic at the Moreau Town Planning Board meeting. And that just seems silly that poor vet had to somehow do a traffic study, but this facility hasn't had to. So we'll push a little harder for that. And I assume this does not go by the elementary schools. Is that correct? When you put up the map, it's difficult to see the truck route because I need a route, and I need to know if that's Fort Edward Road that it's coming in from.
Fort Edward and a right turn on Bluebird, so it does not go past the school. Correct.
It just comes down to Fort Edward, which is just a little bit from where I live. Yeah, it's cool. That works. So I'm writing to you as a concerned local citizen, and I'm definitely against the approval of biochar facility as it's being promoted for the town of Moreau. It lays along the precious Hudson River corridor. Even though you're saying there's going to be no emissions in water, what's being dried out, all that water's got to go somewhere. And this whole region just recently survived the impact of dredging the Hudson River. So why would we have dredged the Hudson River to now bring everybody's PFAS and bio-waste and whatever here and put it on the shores of the Hudson River? Doesn't make sense. We've far too long been exposed to pollutants from corporations who have long moved from here. If you're unsuccessful and you pollute us, you're going to move from here, just like everybody else did. So it's my hope with the recent release that Commissioner Basil Sagas put out, I believe, just yesterday, about regulating PFOAs, PFOSs, dioxane in New York State waters, and in his words, will quote the state's ongoing efforts to protect public health and environment and prevent exposure to emerging contaminants through the protection of drinking water sources. And as Tracy said, drinking water sources be involved in whatever gets put up in the air. So the new guidance values for PFOAs and dioxin provide protection for aquatic life. With a reservoir in close proximity, it was stated, this is his quote, good Basil, I love reading his DEC announcements. The guidance values released today provide complementary protection of ambient waters used as drinking water sources. The guidance values will initially be incorporated into requirements for industrial discharges needing a DEC state pollutant discharge, an SPDES permit, reducing facilities' potential contribution of harmful levels of emerging contaminants in the environment. Hopefully, you guys are not across the line for any of these new limits that Sagos is talking about, because
Permits have
this
not been issued
application.
yet, so we
So
are.
they haven't. So all of this is going to be
We are
within
all-
your
yes.
requirements.
It'll all
That's
be
really
part of
good.
our permit requirements.
So I'm not exactly sure why any community, but certainly this community, which is already in the disadvantaged area, would want Saratoga Biochar Solutions, bringing everyone else's waste products to our community, when it was additionally stated by DC that several new laws starting this year will help protect public health and the environment by reducing exposure to these emerging contaminants, and is putting restrictions on household cleaning, personal care, cosmetic, food packaging, and children's product. They all end up in the waste treatment plants, creating biosludge, and it's all headed our way. Of course, this region is against SBS. We've had enough with industrial development, its negative impacts, and the degradation of our environment. Enough said. Nice to meet you guys. Hands off the Hudson. I was at your last meeting. I'll be at all your meetings. It's not a problem. Okay.
Thank you, Therese.
Okay, we've got an online question teed up. We've got an online question. Just, I don't want your hands to get tired, so give us a second. We'll go back to the audience after this one.
Is that participant ready to go?
It just takes a minute in between, but if we don't take the minute, we'll never get to it.
Okay, so while we're waiting for that participant remotely to begin speaking and unmute, Teresa, I'd just like to, of many things that you said, respond to one, which is the availability or accessibility of test data for an operating facility. Our intention is to receive our third-party emissions monitoring results and immediately post them on our website for public review. That's our intention.
Because we're a low emission process, quite frankly, and we have nothing to be worried about.
You just have to be really careful about saying that, because he's already said that there is.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what causes the concern, is when you act lackadaisical. Yeah. I'm sorry, but you.
We've addressed this quite extensively in our permit application.
No, I'm just saying,
And-
you're way too casual.
It's your attitude.
Yeah, about what's
Okay.
affecting.
It's your attitude.
Okay, she's ready. Let's go.
Hi, my name is Shannon Gillis, and I am also a co-founder of Hands Off the Hudson with Therese. I want to thank everyone for their questions and their time tonight. Some really great points have been made. I have a few questions from my students. I'm a teacher at Hudson Falls Middle School, and first, I just want to say many of them are watching this, and I'm quite concerned with the level of aggressiveness by the people representing this company, the way you speak to the community members and your interactions. I would just say, as an educator, I hope that they are watching this and are seeing some of the negative side effects of being asked for this this review process to move forward. They have some questions for you. One of our questions is, if a plant takes in carbon dioxide from the air and fertilizer contains nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, what exactly is a carbon fertilizer? There is no mechanism for carbon to enter a plant's roots and become a part of sugar, and they're looking for that question to be answered. They also want to know how the trash burn plant is operating without 2 permits. The DEC is not enforcing those permits, and that plant is allowed to burn without the permits. They would like to know, if you're operating outside of your limits, will you shut down your plant in the absence of the DEC enforcing? Their next question is about your person preparing your permits, Andrew. We looked into it, and the member of your company who was found by an independent researcher to have been a part of a firm that was representing a plant that was shut down is saying that he is not responsible. He was just a member of a firm representing them. What stake does Andrew have in this process? If this process were to fail and Andrew put this on his resume, would Andrew be responsible for false claims or misdirecting the surrounding communities based on his inadequacies or his lack of knowledge? And so those are the questions our middle schoolers would like to ask you, and we are waiting your response.
Great. Well, I'll take the carbon question. That's a great question. First, carbon is not necessarily a plant nutrient, more so than a soil restorative and a soil nutrient. It enhances the soil, and it can repair
Right, so then
damaged
it's not
soils.
a fertilizer.
Right, the other component.
Fertilizer.
Correct. The other
They have
components.
the definition
The
for.
other.
They're asking why you put them together.
The other components within the carbon fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and all the micronutrients are the fertilizer components. Carbon just simply bonds them together and is a great soil additive.
Think of carbon as instead of using salt, we're using carbon to bind nutrients. Salt is corrosive to soils, destroys them over time, corrodes them.
But the carbon is not, so calling it a carbon
builds up in
fertilizer
soil.
is not a carbon fertilizer.
It is a carbon-based fertilizer. It is mainly organic matter, carbon, macronutrients, and micronutrients. The carbon and organic matter hold the nutrients together and deliver them to the soil. The organic matter feeds the bacteria and the microbes in this, in the soil, taking more of a biological approach instead of a chemical approach to fertilizing on farms, which is quite frankly long overdue. I got started in agriculture working at IFC, part of World Bank Group over in Russia and Ukraine. Had extensive experience seeing some very different ag landscapes, and I can say one of the things we've done differently here is, we have extractive farming practices, quite frankly. This material actually restores soil. It's soil restoration as well as fertilization. It feeds both the microbes and the
there's no
microbial.
documentation in any studies
There's tons of it on
carbon
biochar.
fertilizer as a thing.
Well,
so how can we
it's a
know that
form
what
of-
you're putting out is actually doing what it says if there's no independent studies with data that they can examine?
Primary source of what?
Hold on, we
What are
have
you
one.
talking
The floor right now is with the hands off the Hudson lady that we'd like to get to her questions. Thank you.
I guess they just want to know what study, like where are you getting this information of a carbon fertilizer and its benefits if it's not even a part of our dictionary, it's not a part of anything that we can
Exactly.
look to.
It's something. It's basically biosolids
So we
biochar.
trust,
If you're
so you
looking
want them
it up,
to
but-
trust you.
Well,
hold on here. Biochar has been studied
extensive
for decades.
And biosolids biochar has also been studied extensively.
But
for its
biochar
nutrient
is
value.
not carbon fertilizer.
Well, carbon fertilizer is a trademark. We're calling our fertilizer carbon fertilizer.
That's what we named it.
That's what we're marketing it as.
That's what we named it. It's biochar.
We named it. That's why it doesn't exist yet. It's a new commodity that we
something brand
basically
new.
are bringing to market. And it's a perfect, I looked at different names. We thought about barefoot fertilizer. Barefoot. Because you can actually, this is the only fertilizer I feel comfortable putting down on my lawn barefoot. It's a safe fertilizer. Compared to anything else we have today, it's a very safe and needed fertilizer for agriculture. But, how many of you in here are farmers?
I farm.
Okay.
All of us?
You couldn't pay me to put that on my property.
Okay, well,
Not even $1 million I wouldn't take, just letting you know.
okay, but every farmer we've taken this to once more. Every farmer we take this to once more.
I'd love
Okay?
to see you eat the vegetables.
Okay, what is organic matter, carbon, and nutrients to you?
Organic matter can be very harmful. Just using the word organic in front of something does not mean that it's something that is going to be safe for us to put on our food and become incorporated into the biomass. The word organic simply means that it has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, not even oxygen all the time, and has resulted from some type of living being. There's a lot of stuff out there that comes out of living things that is organic that is also toxic. So putting the name organic in front of something doesn't make it something that everyone is going to say, oh, it's like the food in the grocery store.
I don't think farmers think of
can
organic
be
matter
really
as
harmful.
organic food.
Yeah, if I may, for Shannon and her students, there is, and it would be an interesting read for your students as well, the beneficial use determination petition that's on the document repository. So in that document, the discussion about what is carbon fertilizer, how does it work, where is it going to be marketed, that's outlined in that document. A marketing plan, a testing plan, example labels for how it will, its intended use, its composition, and that's a submission to the DEC for review and for use of the biochar as a beneficial use product.
But the biochar that you're producing has never been tested on anything. You are saying you put your feet on it and all these things. You will also live here, but you won't. The classroom is asking for data showing carbon fertilizer having beneficial attributes to farming or whatever fertilizers this is being applied to. And what you're saying is you don't have that data.
And there are studies for the beneficial uses of biochar, even
No. Your carbon fertilizer, they want to know. Where is the data to suggest your carbon fertilizer?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah, so
Thank you. For middle schoolers, I've had them read through those documents and we've gone through them. And so at this point, what I'm hearing is you don't have data from your carbon fertilizer that you can put against a control group and say that it's going to do better than not having fertilizer.
Okay.
That's primary data.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could go to our next question.
I will say this,
I have
biochar,
two other
typical
ones.
biochar from wood, it needs to be inoculated before it's put in the soil. What do you do to inoculate it? You add organic matter and nutrients to it. Ours comes packed with it.
Where's the data?
That's
We'll
not
deliver the
data.
data. We're working on that.
Okay.
We're developing more test batches. We are going to have the data. I can send you a fertilizer analysis of what we've done to date. It's all there. NPK, sulfur content, iron, copper. I mean, there's a lot of micronutrients and macronutrients in the material. Yes, back there. Okay.
I believe.
Are you finished online?
Jessica Donnelly, Hudson Falls. I'm her sister. She'll let me talk.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we are bio teachers.
Okay.
I teach at Queensberry, actually.
Where?
Queensberry.
Queensbury, okay.
Yes. If I give you my email, I'd like that primary data.
I can send you a fertilizer analysis, no problem.
Primary data on your fertilizer being applied to soils and what happens and what's in the fertilizer.
If you're a biology teacher, I'm happy to send you a sample as well.
Well, I don't need a sample. I just need the data. I need the analysis.
We'll gladly send you the analysis.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll use my email.
In the back there?
Yeah. But before we move on, there were other parts of Shannon's questions from the students. If just one moment, did you want to respond to the concerns about Sterling that was read?
Well, yeah. Well, I guess I'll for the. Yeah. So for Shannon and the students, if you wanted to email me directly on what the project you're referring to. So Sterling, as a company, we work with solid waste management facilities across the state, from transfer stations to landfills to permitting facilities. So there's a number of facilities. I'm not aware of one that you're referring to that has failed. To the question about I guess professional responsibility or liability. I mean, I encourage anyone who's interested in the sciences or engineering to get involved in engineering. We certainly need more engineers out there. Part of the, this is an interesting time in solid waste management. The unique thing about biosolids is this is a waste stream that's generated every single day, and I think students can grasp this, that you throw stuff out, it goes in the garbage, you put it out, a truck picks it up, you generate biosolids, you flush the toilet, it goes away. These are things that happen every single day that are happening right now that have to be managed, and we as a society have to manage them. Currently, there's ways that do that. They're landfilled, they're incinerated, they're land applied. That's what happens now. people say there's always a better way. As we evolve through time, we learn these better ways, and I'm part of this process now, assisting with the permit application. So to answer the question about, professional liability, is it going to work? As an engineer, I review that data. I review it against the regulations. I review it against the requirements. I review the information that's given to me. I compile it into a permit application, and I put my stamp on it. So I'm putting my professional engineering stamp on it that I've reviewed this information. Based on my review of that information, at that time, with those understandings, I believe it to be accurate, I believe it to be correct, and I submit it, and it gets reviewed, it gets worked through, and then you get into the operation and compliance stage, which is then the operations, which may tie into that second question of Wheelabrator and the status of their permits. And I haven't worked on Wheelabrator. I don't know the status of their permits. I can't answer that question about how they're operating, but in terms of professional engineering and submitting, again, I encourage anyone interested in engineering and science of your students, please get them to continue with it, get them to become engineers. We need more engineers, and I hope that answers that part of the question.
Thanks, Andrew. Please.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time tonight. My name is Chris Johnson. I live in the town of Moreau. I have two fairly simple questions. I'm not a PFOA guy, but here's my question. On the number of trucks coming in and out of the community, you said at full build out, you'll have 50 trucks a day inbound. That's also, I'm going to assume, 50 trucks outbound.
Round trip.
Yeah, but if you live there, you got 50 going by one time, 50 going by another time, that's 100 trucks. Okay. That's inbound biosolid.
No, that's total.
So
total
truck
traffic.
How many trucks are biosoliid?
Probably about 35 to 40 at full build out. The remaining trucks, we have to have empty trucks come in and pick up the carbon fertilizer, the biochar.
How many truckloads of biofertilizer flatbeds, after you've packaged it and palletized it, do you anticipate sending out? Also, how many trucks of wood are you going to be bringing in? Everybody here has seen what wood trucks look like. It's not an uncommon sight in this community. Okay. How many truckloads of that are going to be coming in? What about the chemicals you use, tanker trucks? How many truckloads of tanker chemicals are going to be inbound? And, the issues of that. So I guess my question still is, how many trucks are you guys going to be employing in and out on a weekly basis?
For phase one, about 20 total, and it'll ramp up to about 35 with phase two, and total about 50.
So everything combined, all your chemical deliveries, you're still
initially we'll start out with 20 trucks.
Okay.
For phase one.
All trucks,
per day.
All right. My second question.
And that's only during receiving times, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday.
Okay. My other question now, and this, I want to get some information off your website, a little bit of chemical knowledge here. One of your initial selling points, I guess you could say, to the town, and I would assume to other communities, is you're going to make this wonderful fertilizer that you were willing to walk barefoot in, and you put it on your yard, and it's going to be available to the communities to use. Okay? Probably at either a discounted price or free or whatever that's going to be. Okay? So on your website, you have your bag on there, and it shows the chemical makeup of, I believe, and excuse me if I'm not 100% accurate on this, but the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You're showing a nitrogen level of 4.5 on your website, 6% phosphorus, and 0.05 of potassium. Okay?
It's the NPK, the macronutrient value.
Right. And I understand how all that works. I work in a business where people come in and they purchase fertilizer. Okay, and they're all looking at the numbers and all that stuff.
Yep.
But I would also like to bring to light that according to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation law, as of June 15th, January 1st, 2015.
You got to talk about the phosphorus restrictions?
Phosphorus runoff poses a threat to water quality.
Absolutely.
Therefore, under New York State law, phosphorus-containing fertilizer may only be applied to lawns or non-agricultural turf when a soil test indicates that additional phosphorus is needed or the phosphorus is used for new untreated lawns. Therefore, it's illegal to use this in your backyard. It's illegal to use this on any farm. You just finished saying how you've got farmers asking for more of this. You're not even making it, so how could you be having people asking for more of it? And it's illegal in New York State to use in an agricultural environment. So how is it we're going to manufacture something that you can't use in New York State, but your answer is, hey, whatever they do with it after it leaves our plant is their concern? Where's the liability to the towns, to everybody here? We're going to allow a plant to make something that is illegal in New York State. It's as simple as that. How is the DEC allowing this? I know there's no one here from the DEC, but how is this being allowed? I've got the DEC law right here in my hand.
Yep, thank
on
you.
the DEC website.
Thank you, Chris. I've read that as well. I believe it applies to lawns and not agricultural use, and I believe it is allowed for first-year new lawn and not for continuous use. And
Right.
the restriction would be on the user,
Right.
not the manufacturer.
Right. So you just say, hey, we just make it. We can't control what people do with it at home.
So again,
you're going to walk barefoot in it, and it's going to all run off. If we all use this, if the farms are going to use this that love your product, this is all going to end up in the Hudson River. It's going to end up in our water. It's going to end up in our drinking. Their website says, and I quote, phosphorus interferes with boating and swimming, harms fish populations, degrades drinking water quality.
We need to send that to Basil Sagas as his statement yesterday.
So that's my question to everybody here. Why are we allowing this? Thank you.
I'm not going to argue. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
This is a community pulling together, guys, and it's a very serious community that's been inundated with pollution. So maybe you.
Would you like the microphone again?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm just being fair to the people with their hands up.
Yeah.
People here want to hear what I'm saying.
Okay.
So I think that.
So they have their hands up, though.
Step up to the microphone so we get on public record, please.
So maybe you can find a community who has not felt and does not continue to feel as passionate about the pollution that's here already. So maybe there is another community who I can honestly say is not as scared as this community, because we have had the highest cancer rates in, I believe, the country. My kids know those terms, not me. But I was a CT tech, and I scanned all of them. So we are scared about what you're scoffing at, because you don't live here. That's my statement. And we are all networking, working at home at night and losing sleep to try to come up with facts like what that guy just did.
Thank you.
Hats off.
Thank you. Do you have a remote? Do you have one teed up right now?
Hi there. My name's Robin Healy.
Hi, Robin. Go ahead, Robin.
Deep breath time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a permaculture design consultant and teacher. I taught the first permaculture design course in New York City for Bloomberg. When I took my permaculture design course, we learned about biochar. And it was discovered in South America, actually. And it's little pieces of carbon in the soil. And what happens is it acts as breeding grounds for bacteria that are beneficial to the plants that grow in the jungles and everywhere else, frankly. Did you guys trademark that word?
Which?
Biochar.
No.
Okay, because I'm sure you know about the fire cider litigation that happened. The company tried to trademark fire cider and prevent all the other companies that made the stuff from using that word. And it went into litigation. And because the word's been around for so long, the judge threw it out and they had to change their name.
That's why we call it carbon fertilizer.
Right, right. But all the carbon does is act as a hotel for microorganisms. So why would you want to clog it up with other stuff? Because it's going to take a lot longer to be utilized in the soil.
Well, we use carbon as a delivery method. So it's got organic matter, nutrients.
Well, what's wrong with throwing compost on the ground, which you can do by hand, by the way, and walk on?
You're not remediating the
That works
contaminants
too.
in the
What's
material.
wrong with sheet mulching? What we need is a nation of gardeners.
Yeah, but compost does carry more pathogens and disease than what we can.
Yeah, but compost is balanced, and if it's done right, it doesn't have much for pathogens in it.
Compost is a good thing. It recycles and takes stuff out of the landfill. I still recommend it, but we're trying to do a better thing with the carbon.
Yeah, but it isn't better because compost is far more complicated than what your product is.
Well, I disagree to that because
Well, you can all you want, but biology usually trumps chemistry.
I would agree with you there.
Secondly,
That's what we're trying to do.
Secondly, where are you going to get the wood from?
Basically, wood waste from municipalities, Town of Moreau.
Well, municipalities like Glens Falls, they already chip their wood up and mix it in the compost and supply it to the city.
We've also got other commercial resources.
Okay, so you want to help take trees that are sequestering carbon already and destroy them and then make a fertilizer out of it.
We can only receive chipped wood coming to us, first of all.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
We're not set up for primary grind or any large grinder at this
We're not
point.
bringing
We've reduced that.
Oh, no, you're not. But what's going to happen is it's going to encourage the guys that are already chipping it to do a lot more.
There's a lot of wood waste in this region.
Not much. Not half as much as there was.
Decent amount.
Most of the trees in this area are less than 70 years old.
It's about a truck a day per line, so 3 trucks of wood a day, roughly.
Okay. You ever thought about milorganite?
Oh, we know all about milorganite.
What about it?
You could set up areas all over the state to make milorganite. I don't think people.
It's a dried biosolids product.
I don't
It's
think
still not treating the contaminants in the material. And it takes a lot of energy to produce it. I mean, the natural gas involved in just running a dryer, we are offsetting that 68% in our process.
Okay, I'm aware also that there is some research going on connected with Paul Stamets. You familiar with him?
No, not right off.
He's probably the foremost fungi researcher in the world right now.
Fungi research.
And they're working on fungi and bacteria to break down PFAS in all its forms. So you might
all
consider
I can say
something
is I've
like
looked at
that.
compost with biochar, and it accelerates the process.
No, you're
of
not.
substantially.
Your product is not biochar. Okay?
It's called biosolids.
You guys
biochar.
stole that term from people like David Yarrow.
I know David Yarrow personally, and he's one of the people that got me involved in this.
I'm sure.
And I have all due respect for him. He's an amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
one
but
of the most knowledgeable people
he's not
about this.
throwing other products into the carbon. All he's doing, I've seen it at his conferences. Yeah, and I know the guy too, when he was living with Nate Darrow.
Mm-hmm.
And all he was doing paralysis on wood. That was it. That was the biochar.
You can ask David Yarrow about what we're doing, and he will be very positive about what we're doing.
I'll see about that. I will ask him.
And send
Please
him my
do.
regards.
I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you.
Okay.
I'll publish what he says, okay?
Perfect.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on a second. We got an online call. Just a second. Heat up. Just so you know, David Yarrow is one of the people that inspired me to get into this business. So, known him for years.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please state your name and where you're from and your question or comment.
All right, my name is Juan Llanes. I'm currently a student at Cooper Union here in New York City. I'm currently working on a class called Carbon Dioxide Capture Technologies, and actually tomorrow I'm doing a presentation on the whole SBS situation and what's happening. I have studied biochar in the past, and I've had projects on it, and it's known to be used as a fertilizer, and that's something I've actually studied greatly, and it's known to be effective. But I wanted to ask about the PFAS more specifically. I was listening to the public participation meeting on December 19th, and I heard that you said that the pyrolysis process does not destroy the PFAS, but it vaporizes it, and then it's burned in the gas combustion chamber. My question is, where or like how do you know that the pyrolysis actually evaporates or makes the PFAS in gas
That's
phase?
easy. You test the solids and see if they have PFAS in it. You test the carbon
Yes,
fertilizer.
so that's back into my research. I actually worked on biochar, and one of the tests that we did, it was a mass spectroscopy on the final biochar, and we did have a very, very small percentage of PFAS, but we did find some. So I'm just wondering, I didn't find any research online that showed that they are removed, so I'm just wondering what is the basis, the scientific basis for that. And the process is maybe different, the process that I used in my lab, small scale lab, compared to yours, but I'm just curious as to how do you know for sure that they're being removed from the solids?
You want to take that? Did you get the whole question?
I think so. Mainly,
maybe just restate the question, make sure we understood it, if you can. Can you restate the key question there? We want to be sure we heard your question correctly.
I think it's...
He's unmuting him again.
Okay. We've run samples and tested the samples of the biochar to see if there's PFAS in it, okay? And that's how we know at certain levels and certain temperatures, it can fully separate in the pyrolysis step. But pyrolysis alone doesn't operate at high enough temperature to destroy PFAS, period. We look at it as an initial step in our process that separates PFAS from the solids. And we take it up to about 1150 degrees at that point to ensure complete separation even of PFOA. And that's, again, the determining constituent. That's the most difficult one to get to separate. It's also the most difficult variety to destroy thermally. So we basically take it up to that temperature in the pyrolysis section. That gas, it's different than gasification. Gasification, you can get incomplete combustion in because you're basically heating within the kiln per se. But in our process, we don't have any flame in the kiln. All that gas produced in the kiln is taken to an advanced thermal oxidizer and taken up to 2300 degrees to basically destroy the PFAS and break it down. It breaks that fluorine bond, the carbon-fluorine bond. And it does that at 2300 degrees because it's now in a gas form. It's much more volatile than it is if it's attached to a solid. If it's a solid at the same temperature, you're going to have incomplete combustion, incinerators. But because you're taking that initial step and you're separating initially, it's in a gas form. Like any other volatile organic compound, it's much more volatile in that form, and it's easier to destroy.
Yeah, understood. Just a quick follow-up is that data that you guys do on the solids that you're working with, is it available anywhere online that I can see the science and the process that you're doing? Or
it's all in our permit applications, all this information with the DEC, and that is publicly available. We have a lot of that on our website, so feel free to look through our website. It's there.
Yep, and I would also encourage you to look up the Water Environment Foundation or Federation.
Yeah, WEF is really good resource.
The conference proceedings, and there in particular, there's a study, the removal and transformation of PFAS from biosolids in high temperature pyrolysis, and that has a good breakdown of testing of biosolids, testing of the resultant biochar, the bio-oil, and the biogas, the synthesis gas, and it has all the breakdown of accounting for where the PFAS compounds go when they come out of the biosolids during the pyrolysis process. So again, I'd encourage you to look up the Water Environment Federation. They have a great article, and that probably have the information you're looking for.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sorry, you've been waiting forever.
Actually, this gentleman here, there's a lot of people that have been waiting, but if we could please stood up like 2 or 3 times already.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We will get you. We have time left. We have time.
Thank you. Brandon Aird. I live at 114 Fort Edward Road. I've been coming to every meeting since June, since I found out about this project. Unfortunately, that was after the vote and after the public hearing. And I don't have as much of a complex questions as everyone else. I was digging into you, Mr. Appy, sorry. As the face of the company and voice of your company, how come it's not on your Twitter page as the CEO?
Sorry, could you repeat? How come it's not what?
How come there's no mention of Saratoga Biochar on your Twitter page?
In the what page?
Your Twitter page?
Oh, my Twitter page. So I think the last Twitter page that I had was probably during my time at Anise & Associates and something my marketing department wanted me to create. I don't believe I've updated that page since 2015 or 16.
Would you agree
I'm not actively using Twitter.
Would you agree social media is a powerful presence?
I would, and I use LinkedIn for professional references and contacts. So you could find my bio there.
As a unproven process, don't you think you should be getting this out to more people, as in using Twitter to reach more people, to get your process out and known?
We are. I was just on a radio, public radio show in Kansas City just the other day, last week.
I know, but the
doing
CEO has no mention of his company on his Twitter, which is a
I
major.
haven't updated my Facebook page since 2005. I mean, is that relevant?
Well, I'm just saying, if he's a technology background, I want to make sure he's digging into all aspects. And I figured updating your Twitter page takes about 30 seconds, you would say.
All right.
Right?
Maybe I should do that. But you can find me on LinkedIn.
The Twitter page for you.
Okay.
We'll get on that.
Do you have any connection with Anise & Associates going forward?
Do I have any what?
Connection with that past company, Anise & Associates?
No, sold the business, worked for the buyer for just under 2 years, and pulled my parachute in 2019. So no, I exited that business effectively in February 2019.
I see you moved up in that company. You moved up as a salesperson?
I started as an engineer, went to sales, and then management, and then became the CEO.
Into your insurance policy, $1 million per incident. Could you go into how that process is handled and who pays for it if it goes over?
Repeat that question.
Yeah, I don't understand the
Your insurance
policy on what?
Is covered for $1 million, right? If there's any incident.
Not necessarily, no. Bryce?
What is it? Can you go over the insurance policy?
Are you referring to like environmental liability or employee?
Yes, for the environmental part of it.
Bryce, do you want, we do have an insurance quote for when we begin operations. We have a proposal. We'd be happy to share that with you.
I believe at a past meeting you said it was maxed out at $1 million.
What do you mean maxed out? It's per $1 million.
So the insurance company would pay per incident up to $1 million, as in if it goes over $1 million, who would be liable for those costs? The town residents, the town row, Fort Edward, Hudson Falls.
We won't have insurance on a facility until we have a facility, and so when we do that, we'd be happy to publish that and provide that for you.
So if there's an incident, let's just say something happens and there is an environmental incident, the insurance company is going to cover that up to $1 million. Is that your policy?
I'm not saying that my policy is $1 million. I don't have a policy yet. We have a proposal for a policy for when the facility is built.
And what is the max for that policy?
I don't know. Bryce, do you want to? I don't know if we can even answer that right now.
Well, yeah.
No, it's $1 million. So who pays for it if it goes over that bill? If the bill is $2 million, who pays the second $1 million?
Sues for $5 million. We only have $1 million.
If the town of Monroe sues you for $5 million because of chemicals getting to water, let's just say, who pays $4 million?
Well, that's why we have insurance.
If it maxes out at $1 million.
I don't know what
I don't think
liabilities are
right
right
at
at the
the
top of my head.
That's besides the point. We never put.
Are you putting that on record that you're going to have more than $1 million as an insurance policy?
Most likely we will.
Most likely?
Yes. I have more than that on my previous business.
I agree. I don't believe that's enough to cover your business.
I had $5 million on my previous business. In environmental pollution and then 2 and 2 on the aggregates. So you put all them together, that's.
This meeting is really relative to the DEC permit applications, and I don't think this is associated.
And I believe they have
Sorry.
minimum insurance. They have insurance requirements with the DEC that we have to uphold as well. So.
Sorry, Bryce, what?
The DEC has insurance requirements as well that we have to uphold. So let me see if I can pull up the.
Can you go into the donations of Kuzner, and if he's running unopposed, why you would donate to him?
We never.
I didn't donate to Kuzner.
Saratoga Biochar never donated to Todd Kuzner?
No.
So the paper was wrong?
The paper didn't say we donated to Todd Kuzner's.
The paper's been wrong on numerous accounts. For instance, we're not actually discharging any sulfuric acid. That's something we actually procure on the market and use in our process. And that's mainly in the ammonia scrubber to get ammonia out of the atmosphere. And even that product, we recycle as ammonium sulfate back into our fertilizer because it is fertilizer, instead of discharging it to the utility.
Is sulfuric acid the only hazardous material you're going to use on site?
Yes, it's not hazardous.
Yeah,
It is, I'm sorry, it's under permit, it's the only hazardous material we have, but we're not.
Sulfuric acid is an
We don't
industrial.
receive hazardous materials to process. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I say the sulfuric acid is managed under the chemical bulk storage regulations of the state, just as any facility that would use it for a process for tank storage, secondary containment. So it is a regulated process.
It was just what the Times Union said on June 5th, so I just wanted to make sure it's clarified. I live on Fort Edward Road. There's accidents all the time down at the red light on the main intersection there. Has there been a study on what happens with a traffic collision with one of these container trucks?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I live on Fort Edward Road, and I agree. You guys have no idea what it's going to be.
There are lights and sirens constantly, especially on.
I've had 10 cars in my yard flipped over with people upside down in my yard.
And I've had 3, and I've lived here for 4 years.
Yeah, did you have a tanker truck spill?
Huh?
Are you talking to a tanker truck spill or cars?
I'm just asking if you guys have any study of what happens if there's a tanker truck accident.
No.
Studies?
No.
What happens when it flips in my yard and we get a spill?
Well, it'll be cleaned up and.
Well, there's a spill response plan filed along with our site plan application that we produced in collaboration with Casella Organics, and that is how a spill would be handled.
And sulfuric acid is already on the market here locally. A lot of
You can buy it in Home Depot from the shelf.
I just want to make sure you're not using any other hazardous materials on site.
No.
No, and we're not receiving any hazardous materials to process. That's a very important point what I want to make is we're not receiving anything that's hazardous and processing it. Sulfuric acid is used in our ammonia scrubber for emission control. That's to create an acid wash on the gas stream, and that basically reduces mainly targets ammonia and reduces ammonia to ammonium sulfate in the reaction. Again, that wastewater from that scrubber is not discharged in the utility because it has fertilizer value. It would incur penalty to the Glens Falls wastewater treatment plant. We prefer to recycle it into the carbon, which is what we're doing with it. So we're recycling the ammonium sulfate because it is a fertilizer and it's part of carbon fertilizer. It's one of the ingredients, if you will.
The Monroe Town Board voted to unanimous in favor of having an independent review performed on the project. News 10 reported on May 16th. Why hasn't this happened?
Because then they decided that they didn't need to. You'd have to ask them. That's the planning board, not the board.
Okay, so we have 1 million / 2 million general liability and pollution liability, 2 million on coverage and site pollution, excess in addition to that.
That's just a quote. We don't actually have a policy.
So that's what we're looking at.
Well, I'm sure
Building, so we don't have a.
environmental disasters in the past probably add up pretty quickly in funds.
General liability and pollution liability insurance in addition to general.
So is 2 million what you're saying?
No, this is just a quote. It's not what we're going to have.
I know, but I want to. You can't tell me what you want to. You're going to have.
We're going to have 4 or 5 million.
Ballpark me a number.
5 million.
5 million. So what happens if there's an environmental disaster of $10 million? Who pays the other $5 million? Would the DEC require?
This is all hypothetical stuff anyway.
Yes, there's chances of things not go according to plan.
I don't know how to answer your questions. It's not relevant to the DEC permit
Who's
application.
liable for the environmental damage of our neighborhoods in our community? Is it going to fall on us residents, the town, or will you guys pick up the extra? Can I get you guys on record now that you will pay the entire bill if this ever happens? If this is never going to happen, just put it on record. You'll pay for every last penny.
Thank you, Brandon. So you've been waiting a long time, very patient with your hand up.
Yeah.
They can't hear you online and on Zoom. I believe the gentleman in the red shirt, wasn't he next? Any other questions?
I just called her up because she's had a. Sorry, we will.
We will get to you. There's so
We got
many.
workman's comp.
Despite the concerns, I think the most important one is about PFAS that Tracy talked about, that dangerous PFAS types can't be identified or tested for right now. It's really important that our soil be pure enough to grow healthy vegetables for our population. What I want to comment on is my surprise that in projects this size, the state of the world isn't discussed. Climate crisis. It just doesn't seem to come up. It's like we live in two different worlds. One is crisis that's happening actually in different parts of the earth. And a normal way of projecting the future is if everything was going to move forward normally. Well, it's not going to happen. You're going all the way into 2045. We may have tremendous climate upheavals by that time. This is a huge project costing a lot of money, impacting a lot of people in this town. I'm concerned about safety. What happens with crisis disasters? What precautions are you taking for harsh weather, trucking barriers, storms, flooding, energy cutoffs, gas shortages, trucks hauling the materials, the sludge, come in, and your factories aren't working, and the trucks keep coming. What happens then? I just want to make sure that your plan includes precautions for climate crisis events.
Well, quite simply, if we're unable to process biosolids, then we're unable to receive the material. And so our arrangement with Casella Organics is that they would then not bring them to our facility. They would go back to what they do with those materials currently.
But we have a diesel generator for electric backup. Natural gas goes out. I think maybe you didn't hear a point. We are very concerned about the climate crisis, and our life cycle greenhouse gas emissions analysis is that we offset 137% more greenhouse gases than we emit. There's very few, if any, carbon negative investments or assets like this that achieve that. Wind and solar don't. Not at all. They're about neutral.
No, I was glad to hear that part of it, but the reality of disasters impacting day-to-day business, day-to-day
Exactly. So
all I'm saying is it doesn't come up in the conversation, which in today's world is a shock to me.
Well, what we do internally is we back up our power with diesel generation in case the power goes out. That's the most common thing. If natural gas goes out, we have to turn the plant down. We require natural gas to operate. In that situation, we would suspend deliveries. We have 3 days of storage capacity. Once it's full, we can't take it anymore. We can't stockpile it anywhere else on the site. We're not authorized, nor do we have any place to take it. This is all part of the DC solid waste handling permit application that we filed. And you can read all about it in that. It's on our website. Yes, you in the blue. You've been waiting forever. And you're next in the back, so I didn't, just so you know.
In front here, too. We got to get to
you,
right here.
Okay, we'll get to you. I apologize. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Kevin Curley. I live in Corinth on the Hudson. And I want to start with apologizing to you, sir, for interrupting earlier. What I was trying to do was just seek clarification because I didn't hear you. So I was just asking if you could repeat yourself.
Thank you.
And what I was trying to seek clarification on is, I believe you said the manufacturers are guaranteeing from their products no release of the PFAS. The PFAS, you said that's from one of
the supplier supplying our thermal oxidizer.
Okay.
Provides that as part of the guarantee. There's a letter we've submitted to the DC. It's also on our website.
Who is the manufacturer of that?
Process Combustion Controls. They're one of the most advanced thermal oxidizing companies in the industry.
Okay.
Can you repeat the name, please?
Process combustion controls, they're based in
PCC.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I believe it's Lancaster.
And what does that guarantee practically look like as far as how much PFAS they're taking out, and what can you speak on
They're
that?
assuring that it eliminates PFOS, PFOA.
Completely?
Yeah, in the letter, yeah. From the
Okay.
gas stream, yes. At the temperatures we operate, yes.
So it probably to provide a little context around that, we've recognized the sensitivity around the PFAS concern. And we went into this with a PFAS concern. It's become a PFAS project more so than a fertilizer project, quite frankly. So we worked with our manufacturers to receive assurances on destruction. And in order to receive those assurances, they told us, well, you're going to have to spend a lot more money. We need a multi-stage thermal oxidizer, and the first stage needs to be at 2,300 degrees. So we said, okay.
Okay. You mentioned, besides PFAS, you mentioned, or one of you two gentlemen mentioned something about orgain, when Tracy came up.
Organofluorines. So I was referring to, I think where the PFAS testing is going is that there will be methodology for testing total organofluorines, which would encompass all of the PFAS family.
Right.
So if
okay.
you do a test using that type of methodology, if there's anything in there that's PFAS related, it will show. That's
Okay.
my understanding.
That-
Where
that sound-
what's being developed for testing.
Okay. So my next question is, I've worked in some different facilities, some different factories over my years, and one of them had a kiln process similar to what it sounds like this is, and EPA regulated, DEC regulated, but they knew when the DEC was going to come. So my other friend asked something about, how's your scrubbers going to be maintained, and is it going to be under a third party that's going to be watching this? So I have a couple questions around this. First off, just to start, does your plant shut down at all, or does it run on a 24/7 basis?
24/7.
24/7. There will be shutdown times for maintenance periods,
Right.
occasionally,
Yeah.
but
Most
it's
plants
24/7,
you have a
365.
You have a big process going.
It's kind of like any kind of power plant. You don't want to shut it down.
Concrete plants, all of them. Most of them
Continuous
run
process,
24/7.
Pyrolytic processes, you don't want to start and stop.
Right.
As
Okay.
little as possible.
So with that being said, what I've found working in these plants is that they will, at nighttime, they know that the tests aren't coming. They know that the scrubbers aren't, however the inner workings of these plants happen, things get released when people aren't looking, right? Is there any guarantee that we know that these family of fluorines are not going to be released when people aren't looking?
I guess you guys should have, why would we do that at night? I mean, we're operating 24/7.
You can do it during the day. I said,
we can't build
when
up
people
and
aren't looking.
release-
I don't care what time.
There's no way for us to build up and hold emissions and release it.
Yeah, that continuous process just runs. I mean,
It's continually emitting, so we'd have to change process parameters to do that, which would be noted in our operating logs, which the DEC is looking at.
Okay.
So there's no reason for us to do that, and there's no way for us to hold emissions and release it later. It's a continual process again.
And the process
Maybe
is
a batch process you could do that with, but in a continual process,
I
that's
think
not an option.
it is possible that the process that I'm talking about was different than yours. So you guys run the same process over and over 24/7.
We try to keep it as consistent
with the
as
same
possible.
with the same base product.
Yeah, and the
Yes.
gas goes to the thermal oxidizer and all combust. We can't separate anything. So all the volatiles and the PFAS and PFOAs are in that thermal combustion.
Okay.
It goes through the process.
So just to get back to who is checking these scrubbers, and are we going to know how much of this PFAS is in the scrubbers, or the organofluorines are in these scrubbers?
PFAS will have to be tested for a stack test at this point. There's no continual monitoring technology available to my knowledge.
Okay.
So we're going to have a stack test on PFAS to see if it's there. If we don't pass the stack test, and
I don't think that's enough.
So my question is,
I agree. I don't think that's enough.
how often will these tests be occurring? I assume, of course, you guys are going to know when they do occur.
we'll be
but you're saying
doing
that doesn't
multiple
matter because of
tests
the process
on each
is-
line in the first year, and every time we add a new line, we've got to do the same test over for each process.
So multiple is a wide variance when you
That
say
will depend
multiple
really on
tests.
what the DEC requires of us.
Yeah, we don't have a
I mean,
permit, that's what
they're
we don't know.
But this could be, this could be far
required once you start, yes, and then as infrequently as every 10 years.
Understood, but they look at your operating logs and see if anything's changed.
Yeah, and
if we
I'll
change
explain.
things, yeah.
Yeah,
Andrew,
if I
go
could
ahead.
explain,
Yeah.
if you
Thank
worked in a plant, so it's a continuous process. You have continual operation of your dryer, continuous operation of your scrubbers, continuous operation of your thermal oxidizer. In the case of the PFAS compounds, the treatment there is the thermal oxidizer, which operates on temperature and time.
Yeah.
So airflow and temperature. So as part of the draft permit that was circulated, there's continuous monitoring required of the temperature of the thermal oxidizer and the airflow through it. That has to be continuously monitored through a data logger and recorded. So if anyone was to check at any time, you have to be able to produce that continuous log of minimum operating temperature, minimum airflow through the thermal oxidizer. If for your example of could you possibly emit more overnight when people aren't looking, you're going to have gaps in data where there's to do that, you'd have to stop your thermal oxidizer, and if you did that, you'd have gaps in data of recorded temperature and airflow for that treatment device, and that would be, how would you explain that? You wouldn't be able to explain that. So, as part of the continuous monitoring, there may be periodic stack tests which are used to verify the emissions, but the continuous monitoring is of the temperature of that thermal oxidizer, the airflow through it, the water flow through the scrubbers, the pH through the scrubbers. Those are elements that a sensor continuously monitors and data logs, and that becomes part of the operating record.
Okay, I appreciate that. So how often are you guys willing to do the scrubber tests and willing to, on a yearly basis? You said
We have a
multiple
requirement
times a
to
year.
disclose that fairly frequently in the Monroe permit, the town permit.
Say again? Oh,
The-
the town.
Yeah,
the town
was
site
it
plan
one of the
requirement?
conditions of our approval in the town is to do that, I think, monthly or quarterly.
There were 16 conditions with the permit from the city.
We've got to release our
So
records.
monthly or quarterly, that's
I'd have to look at it
12
again.
times a year compared to
it's gonna
4
be
times a
fairly
year.
frequent. I think
She's
it's
saying once
quarterly.
every 10 years. Can we nail this down a little bit? I mean, because this is the issue. The issue is where are the PFAS and how often are they being tested,
This
right?
is-
I mean, that's the basis.
I
So-
think it's a great point. I respect that you're taking this approach, and I appreciate it. So let's say this: we don't know, we haven't been issued a permit, final air permit yet. We don't know what New York State DEC is going to require of us. I think we should start with that. Maybe that, given the sensitivity around this, they might come back and say, "Hey, you're doing this every month, whether you like it or not." Fine, okay, then every month. What if they come back and say,
fair. Your coworker here said that it
Yeah.
said maybe monthly. That sounds
Maybe
that
they
sounds
will, but
fair.
once
I
we
mean, I don't
know-
know what the costs are. Do you know what the cost? You guys should
It's
know what
expensive.
the costs
But
are.
it might be nothing. I mean, we might do
How
it once and they say,
expensive?
hey, there's no PFAS.
$30,000 to $40,000 per
I mean,
stack test.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say this. Let's say that the
That seems
DEC,
like within
just a
business
hypothetical.
cost, though.
DEC
Cost of doing business. That seems like it's possible, right?
Yeah.
It's plausible.
Yeah.
Cost of
So let's say
doing
they
business,
say,
right?
all right, we want to test a startup, and then again at 6 months, and then once a year. Let's say that's the parameter. Would it make you happy if we said we don't think that's good enough? We would like to do, say, 3 months in a row after startup, and then quarterly. Would that?
I would like monthly personally. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think you guys would be making more than $40,000 a month. So if you need to make a test, that's $40,000 a month. If that's the cost of doing business, I think that's fair. We as a community have been, we've lost our trust in the DEC. We've lost our trust in the EPA. We've lost our trust. We know what GE did to us. They spread it just like very similar to what you guys are talking about, spreading this on fields. GE did that to us. They spread what's the name of those things? PCBs. They spread them on roadways in order to keep dust down and stuff. Like what? And now we have cancer in our poisoned. So I don't think it's too much to ask to have regular PF. We know that this chemical causes the same effects that this PCB did. We know that you guys are bringing it into our community, and I don't think it's too much to ask for even bi-weekly, bi-monthly, twice a month, once a month. I don't think that's too much to ask. 30, 40 grand. I assume you guys are gonna be making money off of this deal.
We sure hope so. That's the plan.
Would you be willing to do that monthly?
I think we'd like to see what the DEC requires first, and maybe that's already in the permit requirements. And if it's not enough, we'd like to do more.
Keep in mind, our intent is to sell this technology to municipalities nationwide. I mean, if we can't do what we're saying, we don't have a market, we don't have a business.
Okay.
So there's a lot of incentive on our side to do everything we're saying. And quite honestly, anything we say here, we're fully accountable for. I can't say that about what's been said about us. But I can say what we say, we are fully accountable for. And if we can't deliver it, we don't have a market. We don't have a business if that's the case.
Right.
And we go away. It fails.
So you're
if we
saying in
can't
order to
do
keep good conscience with the community, you're willing to test once a month?
I will, but what if we have no PFAS in it? Do you want me to still test every month for no reason?
Yes, I would,
Okay,
because as your other coworker said, there's these and as Tracy mentioned, there's these organofluorides that we're uncertain of. Just like they finally took out, what's the stuff that they were putting in the cans that was hurting, BPAs. They finally took out BPAs, but we don't know what's in these plastics. We don't know what's in these materials. We know that PFOA is bad. We figured that one out. But there's this class of compounds that was spoken on earlier this evening. We don't know about every single one of them. So yes, I would like, if you can figure out PFOA, that's great. But we don't know what the other 1,000 organofluorides are. So if you can also test for them.
But the DEC has no issue with our emissions, because we are very
we don't
low
trust
emission
DEC.
process.
They've already sold us
I
out.
get it.
Let me ask you
I
this.
can't repair the
Bryce,
trust
hold
you
on.
guys
Bryce,
have
hold on.
lost in your institution.
Bryce,
I
hold on.
understand.
Let me ask you this. So can you work with us? Can we get the permit? Let's assume, unless they deny them. If they issue us a permit and then we see what they're requiring, will you sit down with us and come up with a reasonable plan? You personally,
Yes,
specifically.
I personally will go there. I don't think it's too much to ask. I'm sure that this business, you guys must have already invested way over $30,000 just to go through this process up to here.
We've already done a stack test on the material.
So I don't think that $30,000 a month, you guys are going to be profiting more than 30. I don't know if it's public record what your profit and loss projections are on this project, but I'm sure they're going to be more than $40,000 a month, probably tenfold that. So
that they won't be tenfold that. For $30,000 to $40,000 a month in perpetuity would hurt the business substantially. But we recognize that we need to prove to the industry and to the community, and so we're willing to do more. And I invite you to sit down with us and come up with a plan when we have the draft permits and we see what the DEC is asking. Let's build on that. Let's work together on that. And what I also commit to, which I mentioned earlier, is that whatever testing we do, we want full transparency. We will immediately release it, put it up on our website, give it to the town of Monroe, and of course to the DEC we have to anyway. So that's what I will commit to for now, is to work with you.
What's the best mode of communication with you?
Let's trade contact information, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
One other thing to add. How many other companies are coming to your community and saying, we're going to get rid of this stuff? We're going to get rid of these contaminants. We're going to take these out of circulation. Okay.
Just to be on record, what the crowd is saying, that you guys are bringing this to our community. It's not from our community.
We will be servicing biosolids from this community. I guarantee you that.
But I understand it'll be a small amount of the total received. So I understand. I respect that. Yep, it's coming from most of it's coming from somewhere else. It would definitely scoop up Glens Falls and Saratoga County, most likely. I don't know. It's up to our biosolids hauler partner to bring it in and based on their business.
The obvious dynamic is
Thank you for your
transportation
understanding.
costs.
Thank you. Okay, right here. Please.
I give you credit for coming here, and
Sorry
I know
for
you
making
had
you
to.
wait so long.
Okay.
Okay.
Please.
We good? Joseph Wagner, Glens Falls. I appreciate all the effort that Tracy and Clean Air Action Network and the people have done here. They're basically the science end of it all. I wanted you to understand that I learned a few years ago when I moved here from another state. Beautifully clean community, I thought, only to find out that Glens Falls and the area right around South Glens Falls has got 8 times the national cancer rate for brain cancer. Okay, that study was done in 2002 by the DEC or the EPA. I don't think they ever updated it. What I learned since then is Wheelabrator Incinerator, when they do a test, they've got a month of notice, and we don't really get the results from that. And we're pretty convinced that they then change what they're burning then and clean the stacks. Again, I don't know the science behind it, but I've heard a lot of people talking in rooms. upwind of this area where your plant's going to be, you know there's 3 paper plants, the wheelbarrow cement factory, whoever that is, and the garbage incinerator, all blowing it down into Hudson Falls and out into the farm fields. You're going to have emissions. I applaud you for all the work you're doing in trying to make it, to limit it, but we're scared out of our minds of losing the farms and the animals not being salable because we find out that something went wrong with what you're bringing to the community. I mean, we'd love to see a business come in here and bring in money and employ people and reverse emissions and everything like that. But we had this fear. This whole area has been ruined, and the Hudson River has been ruined by GE. They can't clean it up, and they finally realized they'll never be able to clean it up. So the water in the Hudson River can't be used for the communities. They don't need more of this in here. It's the tension. It's the fear. Economically, how many jobs are you bringing? What do you think the payroll is going to be? Wild guess outside of yourselves. You're going to hire 20 people to work there full time, maybe?
If we build all 3 phases, we'll be around 23 to 25 people. Don't know exactly yet what's going to be needed until we get the first, second phase. So it's not a lot of jobs. I recognize that. But the pay scales range from roughly about 40,000 to north of 80. The plant manager would be the highest paid salary.
So a couple $1 million a year payroll, basically, nothing large, but something like that. Basically,
it's a relatively small business, to be quite frank. It is.
It is. We're taking on a lot of risk for the equivalent of a plumber, a plumbing company. Because the plumbing company's got 20 employees, they all make about $80,000 a piece. So it's I'm looking at it on par. I've owned a business most of my life. And I'm looking at it, like investment return. Well, these people can take a huge chance for that. And I think the chance is unbalanced for the risk of making the area unsalable, their homes. If it goes wrong, they're worried about it. Like the one gentleman's trying to nail you on something that you can't answer. What's your insurance going to be? What's your liability? I understand how that works. If it exceeds your insurance policy, the company closes, it's gone. That's why we create corporations. They're going to litigation. We're safe as a company. So I think that it's unbalanced because of the risk to the community. And they don't want it for that reason. That's basically it. Other than that, with the admissions monitoring, it would be great to have on your website something that showed it in real time and updating, which is an app that could be easy. I know nothing's easy. I've done 5 websites. But it could be connected to it to show, hey, you're going to look at it, here they are right now, it's living. Just like when you look at stocks going up and down every minute, the thing changes. If you probably
the emissions ticker.
Yes,
right?
The emissions ticker. I look at stocks and digital currencies all day long. But that was what I wanted to know. That's how I wanted to just throw it out to you, that we're concerned about that. And why here if you can't sell your materials to the area? Because that gentleman here pointed out that doesn't fit.
I don't want to get into the what Chris was talking about, but I disagree. But we don't need to get into all that. The fertilizer is saleable in the state of New York. There's certain restrictions on uses for consumers and what they do with their lawns and whatnot. That's what that refers to, but that's not relative to what our plans are.
That's a business
but
risk. If we
hold
can't
on, please.
sell it.
I would like to ask a question, then offer. Based on the prior conversation with the gentleman who was up prior to you, we would like to work with a representative of the community. Come up with a plan that gets over the discomfort or the concern or the fear, that helps to bridge that gap. You've got, obviously some experience in business and probably been here a long time, and so maybe you could add to that as well. And if you'd like to, I'd invite you to do that. I wasn't offering compensation.
I don't have a price.
It doesn't look like the kind of guy that would be, but anyway, that offer's there for you, if you would, Mr. Wagner. Thank you.
Good. In the back, I know you've been holding your hand up for a long time there, so.
Well, you'll be happy because my questions are on the levels that everyone else. Mine very easy to answer. I wanted to go back and ask you again. I asked people around me, and they said that you had mentioned that the facility is in the industrial park can have 1,200 trucks an hour?
So
What?
the generic environmental impact statement that was prepared by a third-party engineering firm for Moreau 22-ish years ago, I recognize that's a bit out of date, but the point being, the point that we're trying to make there is that at most, including all types of trucks that would deliver or pick up from our facility, would never be more than 50. The environmental impact statement and the traffic study done back then, and I recognize that a lot of people aren't happy with that traffic study and don't agree with it.
You mean the
But
one in 1970 that
no,
was
no,
done?
no, no, no. Late 90s, early 2001, I think, was GEIS. That study contemplated and approved at full build-out that the Moreau Industrial Park that truck route could handle over 1,200 trucks per hour with certain improvements to certain intersections, expansion of lanes. There's some requirements that needed to be met. I don't remember all those details, but I'm just referring to the total capacity for the park that was approved at that time, and that's still there. And that, we didn't create that, but that's the standard that we're held
And there's
accountable
only
to.
one tenant in that park today. So
I know.
you're not using anywhere near that capacity.
So does that answer that question? That's where that came from.
Okay, but,
If I could just add to that quickly, aside from the study with the 1,200 trucks per hour in the peak hour that was part of that study, as part of this current application and environmental review, the screening threshold for traffic is 100 new truck movements in a peak hour. That's the screening threshold as part of the seeker
it has the
workbooks we're going through.
capacity to take in. Now, are these tankers with all this sewage?
No, they're not tankers.
They're end dumps.
They're mesh-lined, sealed, covered dump trucks. They're 40 feet long, and they go like this and
But
dump
they're
inside the building.
huge. They're huge.
40-foot-long beds. They're tractor
Right.
trailers.
Tractor trailers, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Semis.
So 40.
Now, I live on 197, and you said that the trucks would not be going through our neighborhoods. I live right off of, the trucks will be going on 197, they'll come off the Northway, then they'll be on Route 9, then they go to 197,
Yep.
and they'll
Reynolds to
go,
Fort Edward. Yep.
Reynolds Road is 197. And then some of them will be going on Fort Edward Road, possibly Bluebird.
Definitely Bluebird.
Right. And then also you had documentation that some of the sewage will be coming from Vermont. No? That's what I read. Well, anyway, so 197 has so many developments off of it. Fort Edward Road, the same thing. There is so many building projects that have occurred between 1970, when I heard the last traffic study was done. So now we've got like maybe at least a fourth more residents, but you did not want a traffic study. I live off of 197. There has been, for example, one boy that was going through from Route 32, and a tractor trailer sped through the red light, and his head was amputated. That's just one. I think everyone here in Moreau can name recently a horrible traffic accident that happened with a tractor trailer. So why did you not want to do a traffic study and update the one that was from 1970? I don't know. I don't get it. And
It was not 1970, just to be clear. I don't remember exactly. I don't know exactly what year, but it was not 1970.
25 years ago.
20 to 25. That's
And
fair.
there's been so many more homes built.
Mhm.
And it is our neighborhoods. So I just, and the turns there to go into the industrial park. Were you also aware that way back when the industrial park was built, it was zoned for light industry, not heavy industry? Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay, it was zoned for light industry, meaning that the capacity for trucks going in and out of that can't be what you're saying that it has the capability.
I was just quoting you what is actually on the books with Moreau. That's what we were handed. We were not required to do a traffic study. It didn't say we didn't want to or did.
I was at the meeting of the planning board, and it was asked, it had been brought up at a couple of meetings. Why can't there be a, I don't understand. If it's so old, why can't there be a,
Andrew,
You
could
know-
you comment on this, the threshold that we would have to surpass?
I guess what I was
justify a study?
what I was referring to
I'm
before.
not trying to be.
No.
I'm just trying to answer your question.
I live on those roads.
I get it. He's our dictionary
kids
almost here. He knows everything on these regulations.
Yeah, so what I was referring to is when reviewing a project and you go through the potential impacts for various things,
Right.
one of them is traffic. You look at the impact for traffic. So as part of the planning board review process and the state environmental quality review, which was the planning board as the lead agency, and they look at traffic, part of that is, well, how many vehicles are going to access this project? And the answer here was 50 vehicles. The screening threshold is 100 vehicles during the peak hour of an operation. This operation is going to generate 50 vehicles over a day.
I was there and it looked like you were just denying the idea, you didn't want to pay for it. So, let's move on. We also have established the fact that the industrial park is not really meant to be a heavy-duty industrial park like you're planning to do. It never, ever was zoned like that.
We're actually, I don't mean to just, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but on that point though, we're actually quite confident that we would, if we were going to another community that had a light industrial park, we would qualify as light industrial because it's fairly low traffic volume, it's low emissions, and it's a small facility.
Well, we're still, there's questions about that because it wasn't, and it's not supposed to be zoned as heavy equipment. We didn't want it. The people didn't want heavy industry. Like, so let's move on.
I respect what you're saying, and I hear you. I really do. I think, though, the forum, quite frankly, for that engagement is probably each time that the community's comprehensive land use plan makes a turn. In other words, every time it gets updated, that is the time. It's like, I don't know what I can do to change. I can't change Moreau's comprehensive land use plan and its existing plans for the industrial park. Those are already there. I didn't create them. I can only work within them.
50 trucks a day, more than what we have now, and there's so many accidents on those roads. And with tractor trailers going over Fort Edward Road, they weren't built for high ton trucks like that. So that's my other point.
It is an
Okay.
established truck route.
It is. I don't know. I'm not sure how you qualify the statement that they weren't built for that. I don't know that that's true. I don't mean to be disrespectful or argue with you, but I think you may be wrong.
It's a designated truck route, so
somebody's gotta-
it should have been built for that.
The traffic study then.
Well, the semis have to follow the weight restrictions on the highway or they can't be on it. DOT will end up getting them.
Again, I think the threshold is we don't even come near 100 trucks an hour in peak areas, so it really doesn't fall within the purview of requiring a traffic
But
study.
I know the community thought there was gonna be a traffic study, and then all of a sudden, the audio was lost, and the minutes were lost, and, so, let's move on.
Okay.
Also,
Please use the microphone.
Yeah,
oh,
please
I'm
use the
sorry.
microphone,
And this really isn't meant to be petty. But on Yes Moreau, Bridget Martin's site, okay, recently, and I know Mr. Appy goes on it all the time because he is liking everything she puts on. So I don't know who's funding it, if you're I don't know, but it appears like it's a biochar Cuisinart promotional. That's just my take, and many of people in Moreau. I'm
Okay.
just letting you know.
I hear you, and I've heard that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And okay,
Yeah.
so to be clear, if there's no compensation of any kind,
Okay,
all right, I'm trying to build a project in a community that for the most part is resisting it,
Yeah.
at least vocally.
yeah,
And I understand that. And I have a few people, one who is very vocal, that's supporting it. So it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that I kind of watch that and so I sort of support that in return. That's it.
yourself from that individual if you want people to take you seriously.
I know, she's, I don't know her personally, but,
Well, I've met Bridget Martin. She seems very kind, and she's been kind to me, and that's all I know. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry if that other people
don't
don't
know
have
her.
that perception, but that's the fact.
I don't know her, but she talks on her site. I mean, she'll say, he doesn't have the, she talks like a trucker. So I'm just telling you, if you're looking to her to promote you, it's not a good look,
Thank you for the input. I understand.
So, but what she recently put on within the past week, I have read that you've said maybe you won't use your fertilizer for a while, maybe a couple of years down the road. You're not looking really to maybe.
Can you, if you could just stay at the microphone just to be sure. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. So I don't know what that's all about.
What exactly? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. What exactly?
Do you
are you
remember saying that maybe you won't be selling the fertilizer maybe down the road or something for a couple of years?
We're definitely selling it. There's a good possibility we'll need to give some away to seed the market for it and allow people to try it, test it. We're already making plans right now to get it in the hands of several major universities to run some testing.
Okay.
And so that it's likely we'll have to kind of give some away for a period of time until adoption begins. We have an arrangement with Casella Organics where if we're unable, we can't store it on site more than I think 7 days is the limit, 7 days of production, and then it has to go. Casella has use for it, so they would come and pick it up and take it and use it. So
Now, here's the thing again with Bridget. Maybe she should be reined in.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just don't want to get into personal stuff about her or you
However,
or anybody.
this has to do with biochar, and she put in Casella. So within the past week and a half, she has announced that you, Biochar Solution, and I think she mentioned Casella, are doing the environment in New York State a great service. Now, this is quoted from her site about you.
Well,
and
we believe
Casella.
we are. I agree with that statement.
I would agree with that statement entirely.
She said, basically, that it doesn't have anything to do with the fertilizer. What you're doing is helping New York City remove their problem of their sewage and bringing it up here to help their environmental issue.
Okay.
That's what she said, and she's using your name.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make you aware of
Well,
it.
thank you. I didn't see that, so
Yeah.
thanks for the heads up.
And a lot of people said, oh, that makes sense because it's really not about the fertilizer. It's about making billions from taking all the sewage in New York City, and they're shipping it now by train out to the Midwest. They don't know what to do with it. In New York State, regulations are coming up pretty soon where they have to meet mandates. So what she kind of implied was, it's true that the focus isn't really on the fertilizer. It's all about making the billions with Casella to ship it up here to solve New York City's.
I wish I was in the business of making billions off of this.
Thank you for the information. I'll have to look that up. I haven't.
We wouldn't have to sell that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to
You
sell
know,
billions off this.
Yeah.
That's just what
a
I
lot of
heard and what
speculation there.
she has mentioned.
Well,
So
thank
that
you. I
people
appreciate
are
your
saying-
input. Thank you.
Yeah. Billions.
Oh, do you have one? Do you have one? Oh, 1 second. Sorry, sir.
It's all people that are already asked.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I already asked this gentleman to stand up, so.
Okay.
Well, it's up to you guys now. Yep.
You got another hour, so.
No, we got 2 minutes.
You got 2 minutes.
You're still on
I'm
Central
on the wrong
Time.
time zone, jeez.
You gotta update your computer.
So you can tell I'm with her. So my question is, why did you choose our area? I mean, the reason I ask that is, like she just said, a lot of your product is coming from New York.
Excuse me, it's the folks in the back. It's awfully hard to hear your community resident and neighbor here. So if we could keep quiet so we can hear this question.
So your product is coming from downstate, your raw product that you bring up.
Your first question was, why did we come to Monroe? Can I answer that before? Because it's getting late, I'm getting tired, I'm going to forget that one by the time we get to it. Is that okay?
But I've got to follow up
That's
for
fine,
that, but
that's
go ahead.
fine. So the reason that we selected the Monroe Industrial Park was primarily because it has existing utilities that are adequate. It's properly zoned. We didn't have to go into rezoning. The land is reasonably valued. It's cost effective, and it was a convenient and a desirable location for our primary feedstock hauler, Casella Organics. Those are the 4 reasons why we selected and landed on Monroe in our most recent search. That's it.
Wouldn't you have saved a lot of money just by going to Long Island?
No.
I mean, there's industrial parks all over Long Island, and you don't have to pay to truck it up here.
Well, a lot of it. Well, we could get into where it comes from, but it's a regional. It's a regional distribution process. So I don't know why. I've seen some comments on social media. This is all going to come up from Long Island. I don't know why people are saying that. I never said that. It's up to Casella from their operating region to bring to us what works for them.
But you have been rejected by other communities.
That was a moratorium though.
True or false?
So
you've been rejected by other communities?
New Windsor. Yeah.
None?
We were first accepted in New
So you
Windsor.
came up here, bang, that was it? Is that what you're saying?
In New Windsor, we filed, and they put a moratorium in effect, so
Who
we never
did?
actually, the city of New Windsor.
The town supervisor in New Windsor.
After an election cycle, the new supervisor for the town of New Windsor put a moratorium on all development, which included us. We got swept up in that. Despite the comments
So it had
that
nothing to do with your project?
Despite the comments that he's made since then, that is what happened, and that the record is there. Wallkill, we never filed a site plan application. We had introductory meetings with Wallkill, and then we were advised after being pretty warmly received and there being interest, the town attorney did some research relative to zoning and compliance and said, oh, wait a minute, we adopted a piece of town code 10 or 20 years ago that prohibits any solid waste management facility. We have to have a solid waste management facility permit, therefore we were just disqualified from even applying, and that's it. Fort Edward, that's not us. That's not us.
Sorry.
Fort Edward.
Did you find Todd Kuzniers, or did Todd Kuzniers find you?
The Saratoga Economic Development Corporation introduced us to Monroe and Todd Kuzniers and facilitated our first meetings there. They recommended that we look at the Monroe Industrial Park. That's their job.
Will he
Part of
work
their
for you? Will he be working for you in the future?
Todd Kuzniers?
Right.
No.
He's a town
Okay.
supervisor.
You do realize this building's owned by a former supervisor who's responsible for that trash plant back there?
This building?
Yeah.
This building right here?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
kind of ironic, isn't it?
I thought Bill Nikas owns this building.
That's
Is
what
that
I'm
Bill?
talking about.
I
It's
didn't,
Bill
I didn't know
Nikas.
that.
Do you know that he was brought up on corruption charges, racketeering?
No.
Yeah. You know why? Because us same people were against that trash plant.
Does this have any relevancy to our environmental permit applications?
Well,
which
1
is
and 1
what this-
equals 2.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir, actually, we tried it.
All right.
We tried to
Okay,
school
sir.
After him.
We got to wrap it up. I think we're past time.
I'm fine.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to meet you all. My name is Tom Ellis. I live in Albany. And I was wondering, does Saratoga Biochar Solutions own and operate any existing facilities now?
No.
Okay. And can any of you explain the difference between a negative and a positive declaration?
Yes, a negative declaration is for relative to state environmental quality review.
Yes, and this project.
Yeah, a negative declaration is actually, in our opinion, is positive for us. It means that the governing authority has determined that there are no environmental impacts that require an. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I'll just say there are, we want to be exact in the language here. So when you go through the environmental review process, the lead agency, so any agency that has a duty to issue a permit or approval, in this case, the Planning Board of the Town of Monroe is the lead agency, has to make a determination of significance as to whether the project has the potential for a significant adverse impact to the environment. Positive declaration is they think there is potential for a significant adverse impact, and it moves on to an environmental impact statement. A negative declaration is that the conclusion is that there is not the potential for a significant adverse impact to the environment, and it gets a negative declaration. And that concludes the environmental review process of that act, and then you move on to your permits and other approvals.
Good enough. So this project has never been subject to an environmental impact statement yet? None has been produced?
Correct. We were
Correct.
not required to do that.
Okay, but I think several of you mentioned that the DEC is very carefully evaluating this project. So how do those two go together? If there's no environmental impact statement, how are they carefully reviewing the project?
So environmental impact statement is specific to the State Environmental Quality Review Act component.
Right.
So what was undertaken was a coordinated review. That means all other involved agencies that have an approval or a permitting authority are bound by that lead agency's decision. So they're bound by the negative declaration. So any other agency can't then decide to make an applicant do an environmental impact statement. That doesn't mean...
Did SBS request the Monroe Planning Board to issue a negative declaration?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me be clear. We demonstrated that we didn't think it required a positive declaration.
Correct.
Okay. I hope everybody's listening. Okay. Is there anybody here from the DEC or the State Health Department? No. Okay. Maybe they're online.
There was at least one seen online, and as was previously mentioned, this is part of the public participation outreach component.
I know.
So this all does become part of the record, but this is separate from the public comment period specifically to DEC on the permit application. That's still coming, and you still have that opportunity to make additional comments directly to the DEC. And as part of that process, there's the comment process, and then depending on the nature of the comments and the interaction with DEC, they could decide themselves to hold their own hearing on the project.
Okay. I guess my final point is that the fact that your business sought a negative declaration and not having to produce an environmental impact statement leads a lot of people in this room and in this region to believe that maybe you got something to hide. And that's part of the reason that there's so much distrust. And I think it's part of the reason that nobody has stood at this microphone yet tonight and said that they like your project.
Thank you.
We're done?
Any other hands up?
Do we have any more questions?
Was somebody on the
Yes,
queue?
I'm sorry.
We are 9:06. We're a little over the top here for the end of our meeting, so we do need to wrap it up. But before you start, if I could just see a show of hands of people that were hoping to make a statement or ask a question this evening. We got one, two more after you. Okay, let's try to move along.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Anna, and I'm from the town of Monroe, and I was just wondering, what's the net operation efficiency of your facility to make sure it's not going to run in a negative energy equity?
Great question. That's a Bryce question.
Negative energy equity.
You want to describe the GHG results?
Well, yeah,
-137.
that's from a climate change perspective, from a greenhouse gas perspective.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there do you guys have a report, or will you make one to make sure that the amount of potential fossil fuels, or basically anything that you're burning from the waste, won't be more than the actual product that you guys produce?
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is we actually get most of the energy for our process from the biosolids itself.
Okay.
And so from that perspective, we offset gas demand compared to a typical biosolids dryer, which we talked about Milorganite and how that's done. We reduce the gas about 68% compared to drying it alone.
And excuse me, where did you get the 68%?
That's compared to our own analysis of what it takes to dry the material versus what we're actually putting into the process.
Okay.
So if you were to take our dryer and you operate it without the gas we create, I'm saying that's how much it would take. relative to what we offset with our gas we produce. Beyond that, I mean, we've taken a lot of energy efficiency mechanisms. I mean, our goal is to create something that the utilities desire, and they don't want something that takes a lot of gas or electricity or anything. So we've really tried to reduce our carbon footprint, our energy footprint, our water footprint as much as possible in all this, even though the water footprint is almost irrelevant for utilities because co-locating it, they have plenty of water. But from a greenhouse gas perspective, you got to look into what we do on a life cycle basis. We're offsetting current, basically disposal methods of the technology today, of biosolids today. We're offsetting that. We're offsetting chemical fertilizer manufacturing because our product substitutes for it. On top of that, the product in our process, we're fixing carbon in a way that doesn't degrade for like 1,000 years. And so that carbon can be sequestered when applied to soils. It sequesters carbon for a long-term period. So when you add up the avoided emissions, the substituted emissions, and the sequestered emissions, we have a gross offsets of 237%. Net out our actual emissions, 137% negative. We're offsetting more than what we're producing by more than a factor of 2.
What about truck traffic?
That would be inconsequential compared to this. I mean, this is including, this actually, there is transportation taken part of this life cycle analysis. That's part of our emissions, is the trucking coming to our facility. Exactly. That's part of the life cycle analysis. It looks at our chemical use, it looks at our natural gas use, it looks at our electric use relative to the grid and what it's producing. It looks at transportation of the materials to our facility and from our facility. So that's what we call life cycle greenhouse gas analysis, performed by eco-engineers. They've been around a long time. They've worked on all kinds of things from the Chicago Exchange to California to British Columbia, every major carbon trading regime in North America they cover.
So to follow up with that, how did your work with the Ukrainian renewable energy companies help you to have enough experience to help run this plant properly?
Well, when I was in Europe, I looked at a lot of different technologies. Gasification was when I came up, was studying for biomass energy generation there. When I came here, I looked at gasification initially, but I've decided differently on this process. Pyrolysis is a better way to perform, to control everything. I mean, with pyrolysis, you're able to control the gases, you have much more control over the process. Gasification, you don't.
So
and we have competitors that have failed in this because of the choice.
Are there specific companies in Ukraine that you work for?
It's been over 10 years since I've been back almost. I worked with Alter Energy Group over there, investment company that was looking to make investments in renewable energy from wind, hydro. Biomass was a key focus though. Most of it was direct combustion.
And in your project, in your PowerPoint, you said that you think the life expectancy of your plant is it will last until approximately 2054?
About 30 years, yeah.
So what's going to happen after the plant? After it runs through its life cycle, is it just going to stand there? Or are you going to
there's a whole decommissioning plan as part of our permit application. Is it? Where is that?
If required.
Yeah, so as part of the DEC permitting process, there has to be financial assurance set aside for the closure of the facility. So there has to be
closure bond.
It has to get updated with inflation and over time, so that at the time of closure, if for some reason the facility can't meet its closure obligations to close the facility, there's money bonded or set aside there for someone else to come in and close it, and it's paid for.
And does the public have access to read all of that? Is that in the application, right?
It's in the application. The closure bond, everything is listed there. But 30 years is just the life of the equipment, the expected life. I mean, we can replace the dryers, we can replace the kilns, we can operate in perpetuity.
Okay.
And that's generally the goal.
And one last final question in terms of the emergency management response of the plant is, so if something does happen, like we've seen over the past couple of years around the United States, a lot of plants exploding, like fertilizer plants exploding. There was just that terrible derailment in Ohio. So if something does go wrong, not because someone, did something stupid, but, someone hacked the plant or something crazy happened, what will be your system to notify the public of it immediately? Like, and especially because we have the Adirondack Park right here nearby, is your company prepared to potentially face any repercussions from not only this local community, but the rest of the state of New York and anyone that goes to the Adirondack Park, any of all the communities there? For example, like Lake Placid, they want to host any potential winter events. And what if something happens and they're not going to bring any other athletes there because there's factories polluting all over? Like, how are you guys going to remedy that situation?
That's just it's not practical or reasonable that something like that could happen. It's just not.
Well,
To affect Lake Placid from what do you mean, like a fire at the facility?
Well, the plant explodes, the wind travels everywhere. Or maybe Lake Placid's too far, but even a place like Lake George.
Protection equipment.
Yeah, we're required to have.
If there's any kind of explosion, we've got chemicals that inject into the system to prevent it immediately.
It's called a nitrogen purge system.
Yes.
It quenches everything instantaneously.
By having this equipment located inside a building, that's what we're more or less obligated to do for OSHA standards.
Insurance.
We still have OSHA, we still have every other regulatory board you've got to go through. This isn't like this is an unregulated industry.
And how will the public be notified if something happens at your plant?
We have obligations to notify with the DEC immediately.
And the
on
town for our
website.
site plan
We have,
approval.
I think even our town permit, we have to put everything on the website. It's our obligation under the town permit.
We have been planning in concert with the Saratoga Emergency Management, right? On the operating manual and the emergency procedures for the facility, access, fire controls, hydrants around the yard, all those things have been discussed already with emergency management of the county. And the agreement or understanding that we had was that when we get into the building permit application process, when we get down to where we're final design of the facility and like where every door is exactly and all that, that they will come back into that process and continue to weigh in on our design, that it meets what they would consider to be a safe facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the good questions.
I think we had one more.
Way in the back there, got two questions. John Green.
Good evening. My name's Tim Havens. I'm a farm owner here in Kingsbury and a business owner as well. I also am an appointed member of the Right to Farm Grievance Committee here in the town of Kingsbury. And we had a very serious case come in front of us in 2021 with waste coming from Casella being sold as fertilizer to local farms. And it created a very bad situation for neighbors in a noxious odor and a concern for water well contamination. We have a neighbor who did have a contaminated well from it. That is bio waste that was being trucked in as fertilizer at a very discounted price for farmers coming from the Boston metropolitan area. Is your product the same when it comes out of your facility as what that would be?
No, not even remotely.
Our product is, first of all, we take it's a tenth the mass. Okay, I mean, it comes to us, it's 70 to 80% water. We dehydrate it. We get rid of the water. We further condense it into a carbon fertilizer, granular fertilizer spreader that will fit into any fertilizer spreader. It's a small pelletized little pellet, dry. If you get it wet, no odors. And that's evidence that we've basically baked all the volatile organic compounds out of it. There's nothing left in it to cause an odor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, but I have a further question. I also, and I don't want to offend this lady, I'm a trucker as well. And
I like your John Deere.
Yeah, I'm very cognizant of the cost of transportation. And you're bringing a wet product in to work on it, and a wet product is a lot more expensive to travel than a dry product. Normally, when something comes out of a sewage facility, it comes out as a cake, a dried, dewatered cake.
Correct.
You're buying something different?
No, that's exactly what
That's what we're
transported.
trucking to.
Dewatered biosolid.
Now, I realize it seems expensive to truck that material to us, but currently that material is being trucked as far as Alabama. And it's on a train, it goes into a landfill there, and New York's already been kicked out of Alabama once. It's gone to Colorado. It's gone to Texas. Everywhere the train goes, it gets kicked out.
It does seem crazy to haul water around like that, though.
Your state is basically waging on people just forgetting and letting it happen again. Now, with the common knowledge that in this room has that there's PFAS and trace materials and all these kind of contaminants in it, how long do you think Alabama's going to want to take it?
Probably not.
I mean, the state, the state is generating it. You're exporting it. New York is the largest exporter of this material.
Well, there's waste being generated in every population. At home, on our farm, we have a septic tank, so we kind of manage our own. We also have on-site water. We manage our own, and we kind of like that. I wouldn't let a product that has been processed be used on my farm for fertilizer. And they caught the economics of chemical fertilizer during the COVID-19 outbreak. Transportation got expensive, chemicals got expensive, supply chain disruptions, et cetera, so forth. So local farmers looked for an alternative way to fertilize fields, and they went with this product that Casella sold. There'll never be any more of that in the town of Kingsbury, I can promise you that. That will never be spread on a field in Kingsbury. The other thing is that Casella made it sound to the farmers, hey, this is a great deal. We're going to save you a lot of money. Once again, I'm a trucker, and I know what they were charging to bring a 28-ton load, which is capacity, 80,000 pounds is as much as you can put on a non-permitted semi for gross weight. So you got about 28 tons of material plus the tare weight. And they were charging $600 to bring that from Boston to here. Gosh, if your car broke down at exit 15, you couldn't get it towed back to Hudson Falls for $600 on a little flatbed. So you know darn well this is being subsidized somewhere else by a municipality who needs to unload their waste, and they're looking for opportunities to get it out there. I haven't developed an opinion on your product or your project, and I kind of don't have a horse in the race being over on this side of the river, except for air quality, which I'm concerned with, and I'm certainly concerned for the quality of life for our neighbors on the Saratoga County side of the river. But I do know this, that I've been around corruption and I've been around government. I've been fighting the dredging of the PCBs out of the Hudson River since I was 17 years old. And we won a lot of battles, but we lost the war on that one. I'm just very concerned. I'm concerned for these people. I'm concerned for you people. I hope you haven't been led down the path. But it seems like there's big money that drives these projects because the waste, the human waste that is getting to be more and more of an issue because there are more and more people concentrated in less and less area, is you have to be more creative in how you're going to unload this stuff, and that's my concern. And one more thing in closing. I have zero trust in what is in the human waste, because if it's just plain old waste, it's biodegradable, it's so organic, it's not even, worth discussing. But I worry about heavy metals from antique pipes. I worry about chemicals. I worry about household cleaning detergents. I worry about pharmaceuticals. My mother died in her own bed, and I'm telling you, the hearse hadn't left, and my sister flushed every prescription she had right down the drain. I said, what the heck are you doing? But that's what people do.
I would say that's an easier one for us to take than just about anything. PFOA is, like I said, is the determining constituent. These are all volatile organic compounds, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, hormones. All this stuff is organic stuff that more or less is just, it's evaporating the gas and becomes an energy stream for us. And that gas is completely remediated and taken through an advanced air treatment process. And we've gone to a global air treatment company that even has biofilters. You can't find them locally. We've gone all out on this. We've taken, every time it's come to a point of decision, like, what do? We take the high road. We don't want this to fail in any shape because all three of our careers are on the line here.
Well, somebody's got their neck out here about 1,000,000 miles.
Well, we are sticking our necks.
It'd be pretty hard not to walk away if I were you guys, because you don't have a friend in the room, really.
We get it, but I don't think this represents the entire town of Monroe and Glens Falls either in this room.
Well, it represents the ones that care. I mean, apathy is an awful
one thing I
thing.
realize in all this, I mean, it's hard to get the people that are for it out. I mean, people that are for it, they're watching TV at home right now.
Well,
They tend to
something,
be
you
vocal.
can say it
They
on
tend to
both
be
sides. The fact of the matter is people have gotten just plain lazy. So you have to commend these people who have come here, whether you
I
like
commend you for
like
speaking
them or
out.
not, like what they say or not. You have to commend them for getting off their duff and coming out here, because people just don't do it. You can tell it at the polls when they don't vote. You can tell it when you have a meeting like this and there isn't every seat filled, because there's more than enough people that live in the town of Monroe to fill these seats. So it's, I commend and thank you for having an open forum like this. You guys dodged a lot of bullets. I'm sure you got a lot more coming, and you earned every one of them as far as I'm concerned. So have at it, boys. Good night.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you. Did we have one more? We're way over, but let's do one more.
Just on the truck traffic, one more time.
Okay, if you could just, if you mind,
Yeah.
tip the microphone a little bit, just to be sure we can capture your audio.
Lisa Ostrander, I live on Fort Edward Road in town of Moreau. We have one truck that comes by our house at 5:30 in the morning. It's a huge wood truck, and it is noisy. There's a lot, they have to come up a hill and use a jake brake, that's one. And I know, because I'm up at 5:30 in the morning, I'm usually in bed by 8:30. And that's one truck. And like I said, like he mentioned, there's a lot of deaths on our road, accidents, power lines come down, so we really need a traffic study. One last thing. Has Saratoga Biochar or any of the developers or investors signed any documents or reached any verbal agreement with Moreau supervisor or board attorney or any other elected appointed officials that obligates our town, the residents, constituents, or property owners to pay Saratoga Biochar for any reason at all? Meaning, if this project fails or something happens, will taxpayers have to reimburse the company for its expenses?
No.
Okay, just making sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
So, Mr. Speaker, I heard you talking about how this is going to, be a benefit to society and things.
This is Matt Boucher, am I correct?
Boucher.
Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate your altruism, but I would start in the Midwest, where you made the mess and it's never been cleaned up. Okay? Now, if you want to know how Saratoga Biochar came to this area, Saratoga Economic Development Council had the representative back here today. One of their board members owns a lot that they're renting. His name's Tom Langes and D.A. Collins. That's why they're here. Okay? Plus, they think they're stupid. There's one smart person on the planning board in the town of Moreau. One. The rest of them are either idiots or in the bag. I went to the first meeting for the seeker. I was there and I watched them. I listened to them beg the DEC to take over, and they didn't, because they said, we don't know what we're doing. You did pick the right place. Congratulations. But I told you a long time ago I would never stop. When I retire, I will not stop. The watershed for the village of Fort Edward is an open reservoir less than a mile away from this plant. Track the PFAS numbers. The minute they go over the EPA level, I already have a commitment from the village board of Fort Edward, the majority of their members, that the lawsuit goes on you the next day. And every single statement that you have each made will not be covered under your corporation. You will be sued. Understand it and think about it before you pursue any farther.
All right, thank you.
Any more threats, comments, anything last? Okay, thank you.
All right.
We're done.
Thank you very much.